Chapter 511. The physique of Transcended was very strong. This was the common understanding of Xia's human beings. This understanding was not only in combat, but also in daily life. The difference between bloodlines could be said to be unimaginable. For example, in terms of physical strengthening, Gelt with the giant bloodline completely beat everyone. Wilhelmina with the dragon bloodline also had a strong body that was difficult for outsiders to match. But on the other hand, Stuart and Xia Luot were more pitiful. It was just a pity that the elf lady could use this convenient curse vessel to fight outside, but in the battlefield of love in the room, she could only abandon her armor and be utterly defeated. Although it was said to be a meal together, the posture of the two was not very formal, sitting opposite each other this time. Instead, it seemed to return to the time when the girl was seriously ill more than half a month ago. Xia Luot leaned on the boy's chest, and Luoya carefully fed her. In such a situation, the two naturally didn't want to play before returning to Rosetta. In fact, they were forced by the situation. As for the specific reason, it was Xia Luot couldn't stand up by herself. When she got up this morning, the brown-haired girl couldn't get up, as if she didn't have enough sleep because of last night's messing around. After barely getting up, she covered her abdomen with her hand and looked shy. 1 second. Remember the elf lady, who had experienced a night of fierce battle, expressed such feelings with a flushed face. Luoya, who saw this seductive scene, couldn't help but widen his eyes. His heartbeat accelerated for a long time, and it was difficult to calm down. As a last resort, Luoya could only resume his old job. After half a month, he began to nurse her full-time again. After the two took a bath together, Luoya, who found that the situation didn't improve, simply carried Xia Luot to the restaurant. The girl was completely embarrassed because of this. Looking at the shy girl in his arms who couldn't raise her head, Luoya didn't know whether to laugh or cry for a while. He couldn't help but persuade her. I was testing Lord Petra's blessing, that's why. I'm serious. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been so insistent last night. Indeed, based on Xia Luot's behavior, she didn't have a lot of desires. Every time, it was a natural union when love was strong, or she took the initiative to seek love, because she wanted a child. It wasn't the pursuit of happiness. The Highland Elves, due to their long lifespan, did not need to reproduce in large numbers. It seemed that they were rather pure and had few desires. It was difficult for them to conceive in the first place, and they did not actively reproduce. It was no wonder that their race was gradually declining. Thinking of this, the young man changed his tone, and gently coaxed the young lady to eat. Xia Luot blushed slightly, but fortunately, she didn't pursue the matter. The two of them quietly began to eat and feed each other. The young mistress didn't move, waiting for Luoya to wipe it off like in the past. But this time, looking at the young girl with food on her lips, Luoya, who couldn't move while hugging someone, actually leaned over and kissed her. Yes, it's sweet. Dear, how could you? But that's something I've eaten before. Hearing the black-haired young man's words, the brown-haired young mistress couldn't help but feel even more embarrassed. She lowered her head naturally and thought for a moment before softly reminding him. Status? That kind of thing isn't that important. Although Xia's abilities were not necessarily inferior to men due to her supernatural powers, so it wasn't as serious as in the ancient times in Luoya's previous life where men were superior to women. The mainstream of society was still that men were more dominant, and women were more supportive. Luoya understood this, but he was too lazy to accept it. After all, in the young man's opinion, this way of thinking was a little boring, and there weren't many people who dared to laugh at him in this world. However, Xia Luot was very concerned about this. What's important about it? I don't want to live according to other people's ideas. When I like someone, I'll get close to them. When I hate them, I'll stay away. I think having the freedom to choose is the most important thing. Or do you not like this, Xia Luot? If that's the case, I won't do it again. After struggling to clarify her point of view, the brown-haired young mistress gently rubbed Luoya's chest as if venting her love. The black-haired young man also thought about it after a slight pause, and finally nodded. Dear, do you agree? The young man who said so slightly tightened his arms and hugged the brown-haired girl in his arms tighter. Xia Luot blushed and smiled. The two looked at each other, and the atmosphere between them became sweeter. By the way, Xia Luot, there is one thing I want to ask for your opinion. This time, don't use the curse vessel to check if I'm pregnant. It was not a bad thing to have the crystallization of love for two people with deep feelings. It was a normal choice, but this process should be natural. It should not be burdened or even anxious because of this. The physique of the Highland elf was actually a kind of flaw. Constantly focusing on one's own flaws was likely to cause one to overthink. In fact, during this period of time, Luoya had felt that Xia Luot had some inferiority complex in this regard. This could be said to be unimaginable for the young man in the past. I love you the most, and I like the baby because of you, so don't feel pressured because of this matter. The child should be the result of our love, not the goal. Hearing Luoya's words, Xia Luot's eyes gradually reddened. She nodded with a slight sob. Seeing such a girl, Luoya's heart was finally relieved. After letting go of her worries, the reddish-brown-haired girl's mood improved a lot. The two of them began to shift their attention, caring for each other with all their might like in the past. Only when the maids entered the room with smiles on their faces did the two of them restrain themselves. Miss Master Luoya, this is the information from the front line and some documents that must be approved. After more than half a month of battle with the Lord of the Dead Tide, both Luoya and Xia Luot's bodies had recovered greatly. Under the full treatment of the Rossetti Medical Group, the daily life of the two was no longer a problem. It was precisely because of this that the heavy burden of work once again pressed on their shoulders. Although the sudden work interrupted the sweet atmosphere of the two, neither Luoya nor Xia Luot complained about it. Instead, they treated these documents very seriously. The reason was very simple. The two had not been in contact with the outside world for too long. In this way, the two of them spent more than a month in their own world, as if they were on their honeymoon. Now that they were about to return to Rossetti, it was time to understand the world's situation. First of all, Luoya was most concerned about the Eastern Defense Line, which was related to the fate of the entire human race. After the Tuk Fortress incident, Ka Dia had been appointed as the deputy commander of the Eastern Defense Line. The black-haired young man had always been very sensitive to relevant information, and this time was no exception. The frequency and intensity of the conflict had decreased. This naturally wasn't because of the mutants' love for peace, but because of the weather. When it was comfortable to fight, it was completely up to the flow. And it was obvious that winter wasn't very comfortable. In winter, the conflict between the two sides would decrease. This kind of situation happened almost every year in history. After confirming that there were no major incidents in the Eastern Defense Line, Luoya saw another report about the Saint Heroes Society in Rossetti. The performance of the support troops led by Master Andrew this time was somewhat unsatisfactory. Due to the distance, they couldn't catch up with the battle between Luoya and the Lord of the Dead Tide. In order to make up for this mistake, Andrew and the others used all their forces to hunt down the cultists, and they finally had some results recently. The Saint Heroes Society had been struggling at death's door for many years. It would be best if they could take this opportunity to get rid of it. If not, it would be a good thing to deal a heavy blow to them. With this thought in mind, Luoya smiled and nodded. He felt that this was one of the best reports he had seen in recent years. However, what the young man didn't expect was that this thought only lasted for a few seconds before it was broken by new news. Chapter 512. Ever since he was young, Luoya Akit had never won a battle without doing anything. There were millions of Shia cultists, and half of them had their eyes on Luoya. Although most of them were useless and could not break through the double protection of the Vatican and the Akit family, the remaining believers of the Savior and the Saint Heroes Society posed a great threat. Both Roy Akit and Vincent Akit of the Akit family were lone wolves, and they did not join forces with any other forces. It had always been the Akit family fighting alone, until there were only two of them in this generation. Luoya had no choice but to drag Heathcliff and the Sorofia family into the car. Originally, Luoya thought that this time, Luoya felt that it was better than New Year's Eve news that Luo Chet's side had been enlightened. However, before he was ready to celebrate this great victory, the next piece of news was even more shocking. For a moment, Luoya was in disbelief. The source of this information was the dean of the academy, Antonio. Or rather, it was a special task force set up by the higher-ups after the attack on the Lillian investigation group. Their specific duty was to hunt down and annihilate the believers of the Savior in the human world. After half a year of hard work, they had a major breakthrough. To be honest, the result of this battle was a little awkward. However, for Luoya, who had seen the collector's methods, it was very realistic. Remember it in a second. Although there was no news of another battle, Luoya was very excited even though he had only confirmed the collector's location. After all, the collector could be said to be the cultists who posed the biggest threat to the Akit family. Originally, Luoya thought that Xia was the only cultists, but it turned out that Xia was the only cultists. This sudden surprise surprised Luoya. However, after being happy for a while, the black-haired young man picked up his cautiousness and began to think about possible accidents. Unlike the passionate gaze she gave to Luoya, the Mother Goddess was generally too lazy to respond to the prayers of the Saint Heroes Guild. She did not even look at them, and the cultists could do nothing about it, so they could only turn their attention to the 6 calamities. This time, it was Lo She's elite team that went to attack them. As a team that used Gem Curse as their main means of attack, there was no doubt that they had some restraining effect on the Saint Heroes Guild. It seemed that there was no need to worry too much, unless there was one possibility, which was that the Saint Heroes Guild would release the 6 disasters and die together with them. The recent 6 calamities were different from other historical periods. They had all been activated. Even the seal of Luoya's ancestor, Kaldos, could not trap the Lord of the Dead Tide. It was hard for the young man to imagine that Shengjia had a method that could surpass Kaldos. On the other hand, they probably did not dare to do so. It was obvious that it was almost impossible. After confirming this, Luoya focused all his attention on the collector. Priest's example could be said to be the most typical example, and it was because of this that Luoya had always been unable to judge the strength of the Savior's believers. After all, they were likely to be lurking in the crowd. However, one thing was for sure. Some of the old monsters that existed since the Second Era were astonishingly powerful, and they might have some special means. Luoya's expression was uncertain. If this incident was a trap, then it would be a trap targeting Dean Antonio, who was also an ally that Luoya could not afford to lose. Among the current source rank 1, Old Man John had always been in the Holy Capital to stabilize the people. The Austin Empire's Emperor Lucas was completely unreliable. The Night Country's king was on the front lines with Wilhelmina. There was also Leighton, who was in a semi-retired state, but was the only person in the Austin Empire who could balance the emperor. After pondering for a long time, Luoya was still hesitant. It was only after Gulacy helped Xia Luot and asked for Luoya's request that the black-haired young man calmed down. Letter paper? The young man nodded and made the final decision to protect his own people. No matter if it was the convenience that the academy provided for Luoya, or the fact that he helped Luoya hide the fact that he was following Lillian, it was all due to Dean Antonio's concern for his junior. Now that the white-haired old man might fall into a trap, how could Luoya allow Antonio to take the risk for his own safety? All in all, it was to provide as much information as possible and leave the rest to Antonio. This was probably the only thing that Luoya could do. Honorable Dean of Antonio Academy. Due to Rose's geographical location being closer to the south, winter wasn't too cold and snowfall was relatively rare. The light snow that started this morning didn't last long and stopped at noon. After the light snow, the weather cleared up quickly. The afternoon sun shone on one's body, and even though it wasn't warm, it made one feel carefree. It wasn't because the servant girl wasn't attentive enough, but because there were only Luoya and Xia Luot left in the study room. Since one of them was done, there was no need for Gulacy to guard the room. Luoya automatically became Xia Luot's assistant, and the brown-haired young lady didn't have any objections. This time, the urgent documents sent from the front line were the approval of the transportation of supplies, which was also the main responsibility of the Rose Commercial United Nations as the money bag and logistics department. Normally speaking, according to the front line's requests, they would give them whatever they wanted. After all, no matter how poor they were, they couldn't afford to impoverish the frontline soldiers. But recently it was different. The supply requests of the various troops were habitually labeled as urgent. Luoya, who came from a military family, wasn't surprised at all. After all, to the generals on the front line, their own soldiers were the most important, and no one wanted to receive supplies slower than others. Regarding this, Luoya could only say that the soldiers weren't as scheming as this group of businessmen. But this was also a good thing. As the saying went, good steel should be used on the blade. Although Rose was rich, it didn't grow on trees. It had been half a year since Lillian went to the front line. In this time, Luoya almost didn't hear any news about her, so after seeing this application, he immediately read it in detail. After all, everyone knew about the relationship between Rose and the Austin Empire. Besides, Xiao Luot and Lillian had always been hostile toward each other. He didn't expect that when it came to fighting together, Xiao Luot would give Lillian the highest priority. Withdrawing his admiring gaze from the young lady, the black-haired young man refocused his attention on the documents. As he read, Luoya couldn't help but feel longing and concern, as well as urgent questions. Senior sister, is she okay? Chapter 513. Roja Arkit was worried about Lillian Archerman's situation. This could be said to be a normal thing. Whether it was for the Fallen or the Saint Heroes Guild, Lillian was an unexpected situation, and someone who must be dealt with. Once something happened to Luoya, the cultist's next target would be Lillian. Because of her soft-heartedness toward Luoya, Lillian aroused the suspicion of the Austin Empire's emperor, Lucas. She wasn't even able to attend the international conference, and was sent to the front lines directly. As for the Shia countries, the Austin Empire wasn't a good partner either. In this case, one could see how bad the Austin Empire's relations were. Moreover, Lillian had a debuff similar to being banished, so it was normal for her situation to be bad. Whether it was the ancient Austin Empire's army or the 10 cities, they could be said to be the ultimate killing weapon in large-scale battles. They had the ability to easily change the direction of the battlefield. In terms of level, Lillian was already at origin stage 2. With this thought in mind, the young man read the investigation report attached by the Sorofia family. According to the investigator's description, the fortress Lillian was in was one of the gateways to the Austin Empire. There were indeed several fierce battles in the past 6 months, but as Luoya expected, due to Lillian's presence, the battles ended in great victories. In the report, the investigator was a little puzzled, but because Lillian was indeed at the front lines and had won many great victories, she was given the highest recommendation. A small counterattack in winter wasn't the first time this kind of military operation was carried out. Instead, it was a common practice in all the mutants' wars. Generally speaking, it was a low-risk, high-yield affair, and also a good opportunity to take the initiative to make contributions. But it was such a good opportunity that Lillian let it go just like that, which made Luoya a little confused. With this thought in mind, the young man frowned and read the document repeatedly. However, he didn't have the slightest clue, so he could only give up for the time being. Putting down the document in his hand, the black-haired young man turned to look at the clear sky outside the window. For a moment, his heart was in turmoil. However, what the young man didn't know was that at the distant border, a black-haired, purple-eyed young lady was also making a difficult choice. The Austin Empire's Fort Noise had always been called a meat grinder by the border soldiers. This was because of the geographical factors that made it so. In history, this fortress had been breached several times. Every time, corpses would pile up like mountains and blood would flow like rivers. This was where the name meat grinder came from. Every time there was a war with the mutants, the soldiers in charge of guarding this place would be the most nervous and depressed. One person half a year. Be it in terms of numbers or time, it could be considered a small variable. But what no one expected was that the arrival of the new commander, Princess Lillian, completely changed everything. If the merchants were willing to sell their lives for 3 times the profit, then a victory with less than 1/10 of the casualties was enough to drive the soldiers of Noise Fortress crazy. Lillian's performance had indeed won the hearts of all the soldiers. On the city walls, the morale of the soldiers was high, and they patrolled energetically in silence. It was a stark contrast from their depressed and nervous appearance in the past. After several major battles, the soldiers of the fortress were united and conscientious. Their goal was to reduce the burden of the commander, Her Highness the Princess. At the highest point of the fortress, in an exquisitely decorated and classical room, the black-haired young lady sat on the seat and gazed at the food on the table in silence. No one knew what she was thinking about with her purple pupils. On the other side of the table, the head maid, Audrey, gazed nervously at Her Highness the Princess, waiting for her to take action. Audrey clenched her fists slightly. After a long while, the black-haired, purple-eyed young lady finally moved. She picked up the cutlery in front of her. Chapter 514. In a classically decorated room, the black-haired, purple-eyed young lady finally finished off the food in front of her after a tough battle. After completing the most important mission, she began to pay attention to the matters she was most concerned about. The new Tak fortress in the theocracy had gradually taken shape over the past year. The commander was Nua Iyer Heathcliff, and the deputy commander was Marquis Akat, Kadia Akat. In order to stabilize the nation's emotions, Nua Iyer, as the princess, had to take the lead and lead the troops into battle. Kadia became the assistant. Regarding this, neither the military nor the civilians had any objections. This also showed the church's stance on the front lines of the Holy War. If Kadia were to return to the country, he would definitely visit the Akat family. After all, the Human Alliance would launch a major attack in the coming spring. This would be his last chance to return home. And now that it was the holidays, it meant that Kadia would definitely see Luoya. Your Highness, I've confirmed that Marquis Akat will be returning to the theocracy of Saint Maester to report on his work, and will set off in a few days. Half a year ago, the brown-haired maid knew nothing about the man who had impregnated Her Highness out of wedlock. But after spending half a year with Lillian, Audrey couldn't help but notice some clues. Among them, the son of Marquis Akate of the Saint Maester theocracy, Roha Akate, was the most suspicious. Audrey was having a headache over this situation. If the father of the child in Lillian's stomach was a noble of the Austin Empire, it would be slightly beneficial for the young lady. But if the father was a noble of the Saint Maester theocracy, the support of the people for Lillian would plummet. With this thought in mind, the maid lowered her head and waited for Lillian's orders. On the other side, the black-haired, purple-eyed young lady revealed a conflicted expression. After arriving at the border, Luoya had completely lost contact with Lillian. The only thing he could think of was to write a letter to the academy or the Akat family. But this action was undoubtedly suicidal for the young lady who was still under suspicion. One of them was naturally the ace agent who had been helping Luoya and Lillian, Paul Ackman. As the illegitimate son of the Austin Empire, Paul had the possibility of going to the front lines to meet Lillian, and returning to the academy to meet Luoya. Moreover, his reasons were sufficient, and there was almost no risk of him being targeted. The two useless good-for-nothings were afraid that the illegitimate son would go to the front lines and establish a career to push back into the country. Lillian was well aware of this, but it was also because of this that the chances of getting in touch with Paul became slim. The Akat family had very few members. Even after 2 generations, there were only 2 of them. They were already on the verge of collapse. During this period of time, Luoya had been assassinated by the fallen more than once. Under such circumstances, the family didn't have a 3rd generation yet. Kadia was probably extremely anxious. That was why even if Lillian was pregnant with an illegitimate child, she wasn't afraid to tell the head of the Akat family. The young lady wasn't worried that Kadia wouldn't believe her. If Kadia knew that Lillian was pregnant with Luoya's child, he would definitely find a way to inform the young man no matter what. He might even provide protection for Lillian at a critical moment. But the problem was that Lillian's contact with Kadia was still very dangerous, even if it was a formal military exchange. Audrey, when will the 3rd batch of reinforcements from the scholar country arrive? Half a year, huh? Lillian remembered that when she was with Luoya, the young man did mention that teacher Chris used to be the junior of Luoya's father, Kadia. She had been in love with Kadia all these years. Previously, she even paid a visit to the Akat family in order to meet Kadia. Unlike other classrooms with hundreds of students, Chris's classroom only had Lillian at the front lines. She was also Chris's favorite student. In such a situation, the beautiful red-haired teacher would definitely come to check on the situation. This would be the best opportunity for Lillian. After thinking about all this, the young lady stroked her stomach. Her expression gradually softened. Chapter 5:15. In the quiet room, the black-haired young man held the letter in his hand for a moment. After a slight hesitation, he slowly opened it. The entire contents of the battle report were written by Master Andrew himself. It was divided into 2 parts, and Luoya could not help but be stunned when he opened it. After a closer look, one of the parts was actually packaged separately, and on the cover, there was a sentence written, "To be opened by Luoya Akat or Xia Luot Sorofia." When he saw this sentence, the black-haired young man's golden pupils shrank, and he suddenly had a bad feeling. After hesitating for a moment, Luoya chose to read the battle report without any special conditions. After many days of investigation and tracking, and with the help of the Sorofia Chamber of Commerce, Lo She's elite finally locked the nest of the Saint Heroes Society in the southern valley of the Principality of Tornio. Lo She's side was determined to succeed in this operation, so they did not care about the cost. After discovering that they might be discovered by the barrier of the valley, Lo She's side decisively stopped moving forward, and decided to use a large amount of precious metals and gems as the price to carry out a carpet bombing of the enemy's nest. In this battle, Lo She's side was very determined and decisive. More than half of the cultists were killed or injured by the bombing and were quickly annihilated. The cultists who wanted to break out of the encirclement crashed into the arms of Lo She's troops and suffered a head-on blow. In this battle, Lo She's elite troops killed a total of 2 source rank, 2 experts, 2 escaped, and as many as 10 source rank, 3 cultists were killed or injured. In terms of high-end combat power, the Saint Heroes Society was not much worse than Lo She's side. If it were not for the chaos caused by the curse at the beginning of the battle, the outcome of the battle might have been uncertain. At the end of the report, it said that Lo She's side was cleaning up the scene, trying to find something valuable, and officially issued a wanted order to the entire Shia for the 2 escaped source rank, 2 cultists. For the Saint Heroes Assembly, Luoya could only passively wait for their people to come to their deaths. However, he never expected that this time, it would be his side that won. From Luoya's point of view, the biggest reason why the Rose elites were able to win was because of the first wave of bombardment. The casualties were secondary, but the main reason was to destroy the enemy's morale. In fact, the Saint Heroes Association did not organize a large-scale counterattack in the subsequent battles. The black-haired youth was very satisfied with the contents of the battle report. However, when he looked at the secret letter sent to Luoya and Xia Luot, his expression became somewhat doubtful. Suppressing his excitement, the black-haired young man picked up the second letter, opened it, and carefully read it. However, as he read, the black-haired young man's face gradually turned ugly, and his temperament also changed. According to the logic of ordinary people, although Luoya's crown source substance had a strong restraining effect on the 6 disasters, it was only so. It did not harm the Saint Heroes Association itself. Luoya's ability did not have any restraining effect on these people who believed in the Mother Goddess. And if it was to defend the dignity of the Mother Goddess, it seemed that something was wrong. After all, the 6 disasters were only oracles, the creations of the Mother Goddess. Having a restraining effect on them was not the same concept as having a restraining effect on the Mother Goddess. If Luoya saw the egg of the 6 disasters, it would only absorb the crown stone and destroy it, but if the Saint Heroes Association saw it, it would be sealed and used as a secret weapon. In comparison, Luoya was better. The second letter could only be opened by Luoya and Xia Luot. In fact, the content was a continuation of the first battle report, which was the discovery of the Rose elites in the valley. In fact, after the battle, the Rose side captured a lot of injured cultists and found that there were not only buildings on the ground in the valley, but also underground. Chapter 5:16. The human body often has different characteristics under different emotions. For example, when one is happy, one will naturally relax one's muscles. When one is sad, one will easily feel cold all over. These are all subconscious actions, and also an instinct that is difficult for humans to control. When she was asleep, Xiao Luot felt a curse power fluctuation that belonged to Luoya that she had never seen before. It was a curse power fluctuation that contained great anger and sadness, but also mixed with some indignation and sadness, like a sigh. When Xiao Luot felt and understood the curse power fluctuation, she opened her eyes and looked at the young man above her. And as she expected, Luoya's expression was quite depressed, or rather tired. If he found out that Xiao Luot woke up, the young man who never liked to make people worry would definitely put on a smiling face. The girl was sure of this, but it was also because of this that Xiao Luot was worried and puzzled. Thinking about this, Xiao Luot hesitated for a moment and greeted the young man. You're awake? How did you wake up so fast? It hasn't even been an hour. How about you sleep for a while more? You still have work in the afternoon. Looking at Luoya, who forced a smile and cared about Xiao Luot and wanted the girl to continue her afternoon nap, the red-haired girl fell into silence. After a while, she said calmly, Xiao Luot? After staring at the surprised Luoya for a long time, the girl raised her hand, stroked the young man's cheek, and asked softly again. This is, a large amount of blood and even body organs of their ancestors were found in the cultists' facility. This was unbearable for anyone, and was also a great insult to their family. When such a situation happened to Luoya, not to mention himself, even Xiao Luot felt very uncomfortable. After repeatedly lowering her head and raising her head to speak several times, the reddish-brown-haired girl gave up on using words and simply straddled the Luoya. She straightened her body and hugged Luoya tightly in her arms. Stroking the youth's hair, Xiao Luot was silent for a moment before softly speaking. Crying? I really can't do that. After all, although he is my ancestor, I don't know him. Rather than saying that I'm upset, it's better to say that I feel bad for them. Was it not worth it? Indeed. Since the beginning of the Second Era, the Royal Selector clan had been guarding the peace of the human world. Although they had also obtained a high status, there had never been a lack of blood and sacrifices. They had always been hidden in the darkness and not known by people. And above the blood of the Royal Selector clan, there was peace and prosperity and the rise of human civilization. Now, 1,000 years later, the once powerful clan had disappeared without a trace. Their honor had also disappeared along with the fall of the empire. The entire clan had declined to the point where there were only 2 generations left. In fact, before Luoya awakened his bloodline, in the eyes of the other clans, the Akot clan was almost finished. The Saint Heroes Association obtained power from their flesh and blood. The powerful extraordinaries couldn't resist the temptation and slashed at them after they fell. As an ally, the Akman clan betrayed them. But now, 1,000 years later, only the Royal Selector clan was lingering on the edge of decline. Xiao Luot, do you think good people will really have good karma? Facing Luoya's question, Xiao Luot couldn't give an answer for the time being. No matter what kind of language was used to describe it, it was a fact that good people might not have good karma. The Guardian's tragic end was an undeniable truth written in the history of the Akot clan for 1,000 years. I don't dare to say that good people will definitely have good karma, but I think that evil people who keep doing evil will definitely receive retribution. That's right. Those sinners who have committed heinous crimes will definitely be punished. If not, then let me. Listening to the words of the red-haired girl, the black-haired boy widened his eyes in surprise. He then raised his head and looked at Xiao Luot in front of him. He found that the elf lady was looking at him firmly. The belief in her eyes was firm and unshakable. Dear, leave the matter of the Saint Heroes Association to us. You don't have to care about it anymore, okay? You want me to leave it alone? But this is the matter of the Akot clan. Leaving it to Lo She is a bit. Hearing Luoya's answer, the red-haired girl showed some dissatisfaction on her face. Luoya saw this and hurriedly explained. We're not married, so? Although we're not married, I'm your fiancé, right? At this special time, as a fiancé, is it strange to do something for my fiancé? Looking at the dissatisfied girl, Luoya was speechless for a while. Xiao Luot saw this and sighed. Location, you mean? For a long time, the policy of the Lo She Commercial United Nations has been to hide their strength and bide their time. In the 100 years of the founding of the country, with this way of doing things, The Sorofia family had indeed expanded their business to the ends of the world. But in recent years, the tide of peace has gradually receded, and Luoxia must seek change. Hearing this, Luoya thought for a moment and nodded slightly. He agreed with Xia Luo's idea. After all, compared with the theocracy and the Austin Empire, Luoxia's influence and right to speak were indeed much worse. If this was the case, then the Saint Heroes Association could indeed be handed over to Luoxia. It would be bad for the Akat clan to intervene. Huh? What did you forget? Grabbing Luoya's cheek, the red-haired girl pouted and said so in a huff. Luoya couldn't help but widen his eyes slightly. Well, you're right, but it's not just the Saint Heroes Association. There's also the group of fallen. The problem that Luoya was sad about belonged to the past. It was something that Xia Luo couldn't touch in any way. It belonged to the sad part of the Akat clan. In that field, the girl was powerless no matter how much she said, but it was different when it came to children. Looking at the boy whose sadness had mostly dissipated, the red-haired girl's face showed a little smile. She began to think about how to sweep away the last haze in Luoya's heart, then suddenly thought of a problem. I probably have to discuss the specific plan with father, but I want to transport it back to the Akat territory first. Hearing Luoya's plan, Xia Luo made such a proposal. The black-haired boy blinked and also thought about it. After all, the situation that Xia Luo said was likely to exist, and the possibility was not small. Of course, it didn't rule out the possibility that there were still blood samples in other facilities of the Saint Heroes Association, but Luoya couldn't do anything about it. Looking at the location of the Saint Heroes Association's facilities and the escorts, it was inevitable that they would pass by Rose on the way to Akat territory. And since they passed by, as Roja's fiancé, how could she not do something? Dear, in that case, how about we worship the ancestors together? Here in Rose, if the family members who died in the battlefield return, they will hold some ceremonies to pray for blessings. Akat territory has similar customs, right? Then it's settled. Let's hold a ceremony for the ancestors in Rose, by you, and as your wife. Reaching out her hand to cover the boy's mouth, the girl said so with a blush on her cheeks, revealing a happy smile. Chapter 517. Rose's ancestral sacrifice wasn't an ordinary ritual. Instead, it was a rather grand and solemn event. Perhaps it could be said that it was exceptionally important to the family and had a strong family nature. On this day, the family members had to personally welcome the deceased outside the city and bring the remains to the shrine dedicated to the primordial goddess Xia. After a grand blessing ceremony, the deceased would be allowed to rest in peace. Then, the closest family member would send the remains to the burial ground and lay them to rest. As a matter of fact, not only Rose, but the nobles of nearby countries would also come here every year in hopes of praying for the blessings of their ancestors at Xia's shrine. However, the owners of the shrine, the Sorofia family, rarely participated in the ceremony, let alone the owner of the shrine, Xia Luo. It was apparent that as the descendant of the king's selection bloodline, Luoya had to participate in the ceremony. However, it was too difficult for one person to complete the ceremony. At least two people were needed. And this was exactly what the red-haired young lady wanted. Although Luoya and Xia Luo didn't need such a compulsory guarantee, it was different in the eyes of others. Or perhaps, the young lady wanted others to recognize her identity, such as Luoya's father. Remember in a second. Xia Luo was excited at this thought. Her emerald pupils were filled with determination. Upon seeing this young lady, Luoya revealed a helpless smile. Among all the young ladies Luoya knew, Xia Luo was the one who lacked a sense of security the most. Not only was it because of the loyalty source substance of the Sorofia family, but more importantly, it was due to the pressure from Luoya's father, Kadia. Originally, Xia Luo wanted to get pregnant before Kadia returned to the Akat family in order to change Kadia's attitude toward her. But after trying for a long time, Xia Luo realized that her constitution might not be able to achieve this goal. As a result, she changed her direction and chose to worship the ancestors to further strengthen their relationship. My dear, you really agreed? After nodding and agreeing to Xia Luo's request, the reddish-brown-haired girl's mood became increasingly warm. The young man and the girl hugged each other for a long time, and their hearts were once again drawn together by the attraction of the rings. After making a series of plans to worship the ancestors, Luoya and Xiaoluo continued their journey. The following days were indeed quite leisurely. It had to be said that with the progress of human society, the custom of praying for the dead ancestors in Xia continued to decline. Rose, due to its unique geography and history, was the best preserved country, far surpassing other countries. Naturally, Luoya could not say such a ridiculous idea out loud. However, Luoya still had a positive attitude towards this custom. After all, worshipping the ancestors and praying for their blessings was a kind of spiritual inheritance to some extent. It was also helpful in learning history. Of course, this troublesome situation was partly due to the lack of information. However, if they visited the graves of their ancestors every year, Luoya felt that they could still remember the deeds of their ancestors and pass down the deeds of their ancestors. Other than praying for the ancestors, Luoya helped Xiaoluo with official business every day. As they got closer and closer to Rose, the reddish-brown-haired girl's work increased. Sometimes it would take an entire afternoon to finish it, and it was very exhausting. As a woman, Xiaoluo was essentially the little princess of Rose. Naturally, she could not work like a cow or a horse. However, it seemed that she had to stay up late and work overtime. Luoya could not help but sigh at the impression that Xiaoluo gave others. Unlike her noble appearance, she could still endure hardships. When he heard that Antonio had sent a reply, Luoya's first reaction was to heave a huge sigh of relief. No matter what, being able to write a letter meant that he was still alive. This was more important than anything else. Chapter 518. Ai Lizzie Akate, in Rose, was the name of the adopted daughter of Marquis Akate, who was in charge of the neighboring territory. In St. Freya Academy, this was the name of the new preceptor of the first year. Xiaoluo and Ai Lizzie had always been enemies since they met. This was an undeniable fact, but unlike others, Xiaoluo had an absolute advantage over Ai Lizzie in the past, and that was the marriage contract. However, after Luoya and the red-haired girl entered history, following a series of events such as Luoya's injury and Nua Ayer's counterattack, the marriage contract between the two was no longer enforceable, and Ai Lizzie gradually recovered some of her decline. The red-haired girl could confidently say that as long as it wasn't a specific matter, Ai Lizzie wouldn't pose a threat to her. But unfortunately, things didn't go as she wished. Was the news leaked? No, that's impossible. It was clearly decided a few days ago, and my dear didn't write a letter. Also, Rose didn't send a report about Ai Lizzie's arrival, which means, it was a coincidence? Ai Lizzie, why is she here? No, after I was injured, I was afraid that Ai Lizzie would be worried, so I didn't write a letter to my family. Hearing Luoya's words, the red-haired girl fell into silence, and looked forward with a conflicted expression. As the convoy gradually approached, the reunion between the two sides officially began. Overall, the performance of the parties in front of the city gate was considered calm. First, it was the meeting between the reddish-brown-haired young mistress and Bruce. This part was rather touching. Seeing that his daughter was fine, Bruce's eyes welled up with tears, which was rare for him. Charlot was also affected by her father's tears. Before this, the black-haired boy had also met Bruce a few times. In his impression, Bruce had always been the representative of calm and steady, with a bit of Kadia, a veteran noble who didn't show his emotions on his face. And on the other hand, during the period when Xiaoluo was sick, Bruce seemed to be deeply tormented because, strictly speaking, Bruce was the first to come into contact with the curse of the Lord of the Dead Tide, and Xiaoluo was implicated. Luoya, as a father, I sincerely thank you for bringing my daughter back. Facing Bruce's praise, the black-haired boy smiled and gave such a reply. Bruce's eyes widened slightly, and then he couldn't help but take another look at the girl beside him. Xiaoluo's face also blushed slightly. Although Bruce had never tasted the fragrance of free love in his life, his intuition as a father still made him aware of the changes between the two of them. As for his attitude toward this, for the time being, putting aside the strength that Luoya had displayed and the achievements that she might achieve in the future, Bruce also hoped that Luoya would fulfill the engagement because after a few years of observation, Bruce had discovered that Xia Luo might only have Luoya in her heart in this lifetime. Ka Dia wanted the next generation of the family, and Bruce, who was also a middle-aged man, wasn't far behind. Xia Luo was the only one with the atavistic bloodline, and her children would also be the focus of the entire family. But fortunately, the two middle-aged men couldn't say anything in public. After listening to the gratitude, the black-haired boy also began the process on his side. Chapter 519. Most of the time, the relationship between people didn't need to be described with words. Actions, expressions, and even the distance between them could be used as evidence. Since young, Ai Lizi's gaze had always been on Luoya. Whether it was Luoya's expression or actions, Ai Lizi was able to capture his thoughts that others couldn't. Because of this, after seeing Luoya outside Rosetta City, Ai Lizi didn't act rashly. To be honest, this was beyond Ai Lizi's expectations. Originally, Ai Lizi expected that Luoya would have a stronger desire to protect Xia Luo because of her suffering, but it shouldn't have escalated to a sublimation of feelings. But in fact, the progress was far beyond her expectations. The moment she discovered that Luoya had changed, Ai Lizi knew that the reddish-brown-haired girl must have done something. She could roughly guess the details, but she couldn't do anything about it. The 2-year age difference became an insurmountable barrier for Ai Lizi. And this time, Xia Luo's counterattack was a complete miscalculation on Ai Lizi's part. In those last moments, Luoya wanted to experience the union with his lover. As long as she said so, Luoya couldn't refuse. And in fact, Xia Luo did indeed break through Luoya's defenses. Remember in a second. Just as Luoya was 100% sure that Ai Lizi would miss him, the silver-haired girl also completely believed in Luoya's feelings for her. After not seeing him for so long, Luoya must have a lot of things to say to her. And deliberately keeping a distance made Luoya subconsciously start to care about Ai Lizi. Originally, Ai Lizi took the initiative to leave Akat territory to go to Rosetta City to see Luoya. But now she couldn't contact him. This was simply putting Ai Lizi's heart in a pan of oil. It was a complete torture. Are you thinking of me? Elder brother. 2 hours had passed since the end of the banquet, and it was already midnight. At the end of the year, the stars and the moon shone in the sky, making Rosetta City, which had already entered winter, a little colder. However, in the hotel room, under the reflection of the fire, the two were full of warmth. Luoya originally planned to rest for the night and not interact with Ai Lizi. However, he didn't expect that Ai Lizi would appear in the carriage, catching the black-haired young man off guard. At the same time, some strange thoughts surfaced in Luoya's mind. This kind of precise landing, even if there is a special spell, it is impossible to be so perfect without practice, right? However, the interior of the carriage could be considered a private room to a certain extent, so it was better not to do such things. As for Ai Lizi's question, Luoya had nothing to hide, so after being slightly surprised, she spoke the truth. It's not someone else's carriage. I'll only come if it's Big Brother's carriage. Hee Big Brother, did you miss me? So that's why. Is it because we haven't talked before? That's part of the reason, but it's mostly because we haven't seen each other for a long time. I'm sorry for letting you go home alone for so long. Looking up at the young man who softly apologized, Ai Lizi slightly widened her eyes. Not knowing what to say for a moment, Ai Lizi was very disappointed that her first year ended in such a way, but after receiving the young man's apology, this matter was nothing to the silver-haired girl. In Luoya's room in the hotel, the girl unfolded her silver hair and handed it to the black-haired young man to take care of. Seeing this, Luoya picked up the comb beside him and began to comb Ai Lizi's hair. One of the reasons was naturally religious. Legend has it that in ancient times, the primordial goddess placed her hand on the top of everyone's head to bless them. Therefore, the top of the head was a place that others could not easily touch. In fact, until now the Vatican also advocated this. Because of this, Shia allowing others to comb her hair was a sign of complete trust. And for a girl to allow a man to comb her hair was even more profound. No, I want this. Big brother. Needless to say, since coming to Xia, Luoya had seen many different hair colors, but AI Lizi's silver hair had always been the most suitable hair color for Luoya. Not only was the color bright, but more importantly, it perfectly matched the girl's white skin. But before the young man could start his homework, his hand was suddenly held by the silver-haired girl. "No, I can't do that. Don't say things that can easily cause misunderstandings." While picking up the comb beside him, the black-haired young man stretched out his hand to comb the girl's hair, and following Luoya's actions, AI Lizi also narrowed her eyes and revealed an expression of enjoyment. What's going on? Wasn't I just combing her hair? Life energy. This was nothing new to the black-haired young man, but this time, AI Lizi's move was different. It wasn't a concentrated injection, but after her strength improved again, the silver-haired girl could already blend it into the air and silently spread it around the room. AI Lizi, you've really grown up. To be honest, when one's strength reached Luoya's level, it was very difficult for life energy to reach the level where it could affect one's consciousness. If the other party's willpower was strong enough, it was very likely that this effect would be forcibly removed. And Luoya, who had experienced many hardships, had the most tenacious willpower that AI Lizi had ever seen. In the past, AI Lizi always used life energy to stimulate Luoya's primitive desires. Although the effect was very obvious, it had to be said that this kind of method could only be used in one go without any aftereffects, and it was always seen through by Luoya and the girl would be punished. The 6 Xia Luo couldn't stimulate Luoya's biological desires. The two of them must have been due to the sublimation of their feelings, and this seemed to be the correct way to woo her big brother. After understanding this point, the girl was filled with regret and decided to change her route. After making up her mind, AI Lizi's expression gradually became heavy, and Luoya quickly noticed that the girl's expression was wrong. The young man thought that he had made a mistake, and after thinking for a while he probed. Hearing Luoya's words, the silver-haired girl shook her head and revealed a disappointed expression. After hesitating for a while, she opened her mouth and said, "Big brother, I want you to answer a question. Is AI Lizi really useful to you?" Chapter 520. The relationship between people is actually quite complicated. This is one of Roha's conclusions. For example, young children were a disadvantage to their parents, but their parents loved them dearly. Old parents were a burden to mature children, but the children loved their parents so much that they were willing to take care of them in their old age. When AI Lizi asked this question in a depressed mood, the young man behind her froze. He didn't understand what AI Lizi was talking about. As if sensing Luoya's confusion, the silver-haired girl explained, "Yes, congratulations. You've reached source rank 3, right?" It wasn't because of jealousy, nor was it because of his pride as an elder brother. Luoya didn't want AI Lizi's strength to continue growing. There was only one reason why he was worried. It was too fast. However, AI Lizi was only 14 years old, even if her birthday hadn't arrived yet. In Xiya's eyes, she wasn't even considered an adult, and was still developing. Or rather, it was impossible for a normal human to do so. Luoya remembered that because of her age, AI Lizi wasn't a very strong character even though she was talented. However, in reality, the silver-haired girl was almost on par with Nua Iyer and the others. The black-haired young man didn't know the answer to this question, but there was no doubt that this matter would cause a sensation if it was made public. AI Lizi seemed to be aware of her situation, so she hid her strength and didn't reveal it at this banquet. "Elder brother, I've indeed reached source rank 3, but to be honest, with the current situation, I don't think there's any meaning in my advancement." "Elder brother, do you remember why I made up my mind to come into contact with extraordinary power? I've been working so hard to protect elder brother. It's also to protect elder brother that I thirsted for power. But after I obtained power, things didn't turn out as I imagined. Every time big brother is in danger, he won't tell me. Whether it was last time in the eastern region, or this time when we're going to face those monsters, it was clearly a dangerous situation, but he insisted on not letting me know." In the face of the silver-haired girl's accusation, Luoya was momentarily speechless. Although Nua Iyer's visit was confidential, As long as Luoya requested, St. John would definitely allow Ai Lizzie to accompany her. After all, Ai Lizzie and Nua Iyer were childhood sweethearts. It could be said that their friendship was forged through fighting. At the end of the day, just as Ai Lizzie had said, Luoya had never wanted Ai Lizzie to protect her. Instead, she had treated the girl as her protector. This was where the problem lay. No, Ai Lizzie, that's not what I meant. That is. Under Ai Lizzie's fact-based words, the black-haired boy retreated. He averted his eyes, not daring to look at the girl in the mirror. As for Ai Lizzie, she became more and more aggrieved. Chapter 521. As the cold winter gradually entered its depths, France started to become lively as it neared the end of the year. The merchants who couldn't do business due to the cold winter shifted their focus to the mainland and prepared to welcome the new year. As for the higher-ups of France, an unprecedentedly solemn ceremony was about to begin. In the exquisite and elegant room of the 100 Birds Hall, a black-haired boy looked at the red-haired girl in front of him and lowered his head slightly as he carefully apologized. Opposite him, Xiao Luot had an expected expression on her face. "I'm sorry, Xiao Luot. I wasn't able to complete last night's matter." During the banquet last night, the red-haired girl already had a premonition that Ai Lizzie was up to something. But for the siblings who hadn't seen each other for a long time, even Xiao Luot couldn't interfere. Not to mention the two of them were living together. Xiao Luot understood Ai Lizzie too well. She was a shameless person who dared to drug her brother. She probably directly rushed into Luoya's room again. "Dear, what about worshipping the ancestors?" Roland said. Xiao Luot, who had worked with Ai Lizzie for many years, knew about her position in the Alcott family. For someone like her who controlled the Alcott family's intelligence network, it wasn't difficult for her to find out that the boy wanted to pray for the ancestors in France. The girl narrowed her eyes slightly as she prepared for a full-scale conflict and made up her mind to not back down. Before this, worshipping the ancestors together to confirm their status was a major matter in Xiao Luot's eyes. She couldn't allow any mistakes, even if it meant breaking off relations with Ai Lizzie. After getting through the crisis together, Xiao Luot was like a wife to Luoya, and Ai Lizzie was an irreplaceable family member. The two of them would definitely meet. However, it was worth mentioning that Ai Lizzie and Xiao Luot both indicated that they didn't need Luoya's presence. This made the young man, who was worried about Luoya, stunned. As for Ai Lizzie and Xiao Luot's doubts, they tacitly chose to remain silent. The black-haired boy naturally didn't know what the two girls were thinking, but it didn't affect anything. After Luoya left the 100 Birds Hall, the meeting between the silver-haired girl and the young miss officially began. In the reception room of the 100 Birds Hall, Xiao Luot Sorofia looked at the silver-haired girl in front of her without saying a word. Opposite her, Ai Lizzie Alcott was also silent. The two looked at each other for a few minutes without saying a word. In recent years, because Luoya had been cooperating with Xiao Luot in the construction of Akate City, the frequency of Xiao Luot's visits to Akate City had greatly increased. The number of times the two had fought openly and secretly was countless. "Miss Ai Lizzie, now that things have come to this, I think we don't have to specially exchange greetings, right? The topic? Hee, if that's the case, then let me say it first. This time, I want to worship the ancestors together with Luoya, so please don't disturb us." "Miss Xiao Luot, are you mistaken? Although I'm an adopted daughter, my surname is still Alcott. Then, as a member of the Alcott family, isn't it obvious who should worship the ancestors?" Chapter 522. Worshipping the ancestors was undoubtedly a serious matter, but from Luoya's perspective, it was also a troublesome matter to some extent. The black stone box wasn't made of ordinary materials. Instead, it was made of the stone of requiem that was transported from the north of the theocracy. For thousands of years, it had been the designated material for the coffins of the Alcott family. As long as the body was placed in it, no matter how the external environment changed, it wouldn't turn into an undead. After Master Andrew led the team back to Rose, Luoya carefully examined the remains of the Arde family's ancestors that were found by the Saint Heroes Association. Unfortunately, Most of them were blood and organs, and there wasn't a complete human body structure. Due to the thousands of years that had passed, the preservation condition was very poor. The black-haired young man was quite disappointed about this, but he wasn't too surprised. After all, compared to the heart preserved by the Ent priest's body, the remains were already dead even though they were also from thousands of years ago. The Saint Heroes Association's demand for the blood and remains would never stop just because they were buried in the coffins. The two of them were almost 100% sure about this. In order to cut off the evil thoughts of the cultists, Luoya could only choose to dispose of these things in the temple of the goddess of origin. Ai Lizi's silver hair paired with her white dress was as dazzling as the early winter snow. Xia Luo's reddish-brown hair contrasted sharply with her white dress, giving off a sense of holiness. Today was the day Luoya and the others worshipped their ancestors. This was a well-known fact. Whether it was Xia Luo or Ai Lizi, they had indeed focused all their attention on this solemn event. But in fact, for Luoya, today had another meaning. Today was the day he completely recovered. Luoya didn't think much about this at first. After all, whether it was because of Altatia's own reasons or because of Luoya's body, time could solve them. However, as time went by, things gradually went beyond the young man's expectations. It had been more than a week since Gulan Daer and the others returned, but there was still no news from Altatia. The contract formed by the bloodline of the Akkad family wasn't something that could be perfunctory. For an ancient queen like Altatia, she had long passed away, and Luoya was her anchor in this world. No matter what the Queen of Witches wanted to do or what opinion she had about Luoya, she couldn't bear the consequences. And based on the young man's understanding of the white-haired witch, Altatia wouldn't make such a reckless move. Looking at the burning flame in front of him, the black-haired boy couldn't help but frown. He was thinking about all kinds of possibilities in his mind. However, until the bell rang and the hymns began to sing, Roha's mind still didn't have any clue. No, it's nothing. Currently, there was still too little information. It was difficult to rely on imagination, so he might as well not think about it for the time being. No matter what the situation was on Altatia's side, Luoya didn't have a good way to deal with it without a clue. And for the current Luoya, there were obviously more urgent matters. After a series of meticulous operations, the black-haired young man completed the transfer of the remains with a serious expression. The two young ladies who were supposed to be his wives also stepped forward and carefully sealed the stone box. The young lady's salute caused another round of applause. Seeing this scene, Luoya breathed a sigh of relief. He secretly praised the blessing of the ancestors for finally getting through this difficult situation. Just like what Luoya did just now, the last step of this ritual of worshipping the ancestors required a bone picker and a keeper holding the stone box behind him to work together. Generally speaking, it was the husband and wife of the descendants. After Luoya became the bone picker, the identity of the keeper became the focus of the battle between Ai Lizi and Xia Luo, and they had no intention of backing down. To be honest, although the position of the keeper was important, in Luoya's eyes, either of the two young ladies could be qualified for it. Now that he had to choose one, it was no different from killing 3 men with 2 peaches. After our collection and sorting, we can basically confirm that these remains and blood came from 2 people. The white-bearded old man was quite careful as he was worried that Luoya would feel uncomfortable after hearing this news. However, what he didn't expect was that the black-haired young man's expression suddenly became strange after hearing this. Then he put his hands together and bowed to the heavens like an ancestor. After respectfully sending the stone box to the carriage, the ritual of worshipping the ancestors finally officially ended. With the end of this ritual, Luoya's mission in Rose was finally completed successfully. Dear, do you really want to leave so soon? Uncle Kadia's schedule. No, how can it be? This kind of thing doesn't matter. It's difficult for us to welcome the new year together with our current positions. As the successor of the Rose Commercial United Nations, Xia Luo couldn't leave during the new year, and Luoya was also the acting lord when Kadia wasn't around, so there were a lot of things to do. Noticing the reluctance in Xia Luo's heart, Luoya blinked, turned his head to look out of the window, and thought about something. Luoya asked Xia Luo to come to the Akkad house not to see him, but to see Luoya's father, Kadia. As for the black-haired young man's reason for doing so was actually very simple. It was to help the young lady obtain the recognition of Kadia. Xiaoluot, I know you are very uneasy, but don't worry, I will explain everything to my father. The young man turned his head, and his golden eyes were full of seriousness. Seeing such a young man, Xiaoluot's emotions were a little emotional. She looked at Luoya for a long time and finally nodded with a red face. After agreeing to find an opportunity to go to the Akhat territory after the new year, and explain the situation to Kadia, the black-haired young man finally said his parting words in a reluctant atmosphere. Xiaoluot nodded and sent Luoya all the way to the city gate. Accompanying him were many high-ranking officials of the Rose Commercial United Nations, including Bruce. For such a person to leave the Rose Commercial United Nations, sending him off was the basic etiquette, not to mention this time Luoya also saved Xiaoluot. This time, Luoya and Xiaoluot's journey was really too difficult and dangerous, but fortunately, in the end, relying on the trust and strength of each other, Luoya finally passed the hurdle and eliminated one of his greatest enemies. Everything else was secondary. The safety of the red-haired young lady was Luoya's goal. And after achieving his goal, in this turbulent era, parting was inevitable. Finally, am I going home? Thinking so, the young man recalled his recent experience and slightly breathed a sigh of relief. However, what Luoya didn't know was that in the distant north of the Austin Empire, a conspiracy had already begun. Chapter 523. After half a year, when Luoya Akkad once again set foot on the land belonging to the Akkad family, the nearby mountains and rivers were already covered in silver. The cold wind mixed with the fluttering snow, dyeing the sky and earth silver. The feeling of home was perhaps the most indescribable feeling in people's hearts. And homesickness was a unique emotion that belonged to humans. No matter rich or poor, it was hard to avoid. But even so, after leaving for a period of time, the black-haired young man still missed this land because this was his foundation, and also the hometown where he spent a long time with his family. He grew up here and left behind many memories. But when he returned to this place, his restless heart inexplicably felt more at ease. In the past, Akkad territory was often desolate when winter approached. After all, to the people who were already living a difficult life, the cold winter was a major threat, and there was also the possibility of insufficient food. But after a few years of development, the southern part of Akkad territory was completely different. This kind of life in the past can be said to be heaven and earth. And as the life of the people got better and better, Roha's reputation also got higher and higher. Every time he passed by a village to resupply, he would be warmly welcomed, which was in sharp contrast to the other nobles who were cautious when they came. Big Brother is really popular, but are you sure you don't want to stay for a night? There's still time for father's side, right? There's still time for father's side, but we have to take a detour. I'm going to meet an acquaintance. As the acting lord of Akkad territory, Luoya could meet anyone in the territory with just a word. There was only one person in this territory that he had to meet personally, and that was the ant who came here a few years ago. Recorder Cade. Cade's arrival was initially an invitation by Luoya with a one-sided attitude, but after arriving at Akkad territory, the giant ant didn't just act as a decoration, but contributed to Akkad territory in his own way. Under the management of the werewolves, the monsters in the southern forest of Akkad territory were forcibly reorganized and brought under Cade's management. With the beasts wearing collars, the wolf infestation that had plagued Luoya for a long time was finally resolved. However, that wasn't the end of it. What Luoya didn't expect was that the Ents used their own racial ability and the flow of curse power in the veins to build a sensor net that covered the entire Akkad territory. As the Lord of the Forest who already had standing forces such as monsters and werewolves, once Akkad was invaded by enemy forces, Cade could cooperate with Luoya to form an army of monsters and attack the enemy day and night. Every year, it was Luoya's duty as the acting lord to take a look at Cade's safety. On the other hand, the black-haired young man also had a lot of things to say this time. If Luoya and Cade's relationship was similar to that of friends and partners, then Ai Lizzie, who had an almost unlimited life force, was the Ent's object of respect. Every time he saw Ai Lizzie, the giant Ent would prepare a gift for her. On the other hand, the silver-haired young lady was supposed to enter the mountains. Surprise? Chapter 524. In the forest, the black-haired young man was drinking and chatting with the giant Ent while using the source substance in his body to contact the Witch Queen on the other side. His expression showed that he had no intention of giving up. Originally, the ancient gods were already dead. The only reason they could move about in the modern world was because they had signed a contract with Wuxia. Even in the worst-case scenario, Altacia would be completely lost and return to her dormant state before she met Wuxia. Unlike the Gulan Dayer's reticence and the Pei Tila's silent protectiveness, Altacia's personality was like an interpretation of the nature of a witch. She did as she pleased and often came out to interact with Wuxia privately. Occasionally, they would also have a battle of wits and courage, which added a lot of fun to the young man's life. Under such circumstances, Wuxia naturally wouldn't be indifferent to the disappearance of the Witch Queen. And as long as the result of being separated for a long time didn't result in death, Wuxia was confident that he could find the ancient gods even if they were temporarily lost. The moment that inexplicable feeling appeared in Wuxia's heart, the black-haired young man's body froze and his eyes widened. But before Wuxia could grasp the exceptionally familiar aura, that little bit of feeling had already dissipated into nothingness. It took the young man a moment to understand what had just happened. But everything was almost gone in the blink of an eye. Only Wuxia's surprised cry could be heard in the silent forest, which even made the young man doubt the authenticity of the feeling. And seeing Wuxia's reaction, the tall Ent asked about the situation. The channel to the Witch Queen on the other side had traces of curse power, which meant that Wuxia had indeed come into contact with Altacia's channel in an instant. But what puzzled the young man was that the source substance of the crown not only had traces of coming into contact with the ancient gods, it also had traces of resisting some other power. The moment he understood this fact, the black-haired young man understood that Altacia was probably in trouble. And this was also the reason why Wuxia couldn't get in touch with her. The witch race is a strange race. Although they are a race, they don't seem to be connected to each other. No one knows the details of their situation, so I can't deduce what happened to the ancient gods who signed a contract with you. Maybe that's the case, but if it's really an external interference, then I'm afraid that things will be troublesome. Troublesome? What you mean is home advantage. I understand that, but if that's the case. To be honest, at this point, the evil forces left behind by Xia and Wuxia more or less had some grudges against each other. So it wasn't strange for them to make a move. But fortunately, based on the connection of the channel just now, Wuxia could be sure of one thing, and that was that Altacia should be trying her best to restore the connection between the two of them, and there should be some progress. The black-haired young man estimated that the two of them should be able to successfully reunite in a week at most. As for what exactly happened, he could only wait until then to ask Altacia personally. I'm sorry, big brother. There's a problem with the surprise I prepared. Ai Lizzie said as she lowered her head slightly, blaming herself for not being able to fulfill the promised gift. The black-haired young man saw this and comforted her. Although he was curious about what the gift was, he didn't ask. Instead, he handed Ai Lizzie a small bottle of warm honey wine to warm her body. Leaning into the young man's embrace and drinking the warm honey wine, Ai Lizzie's face revealed a sweet smile. On the other side, the tall Ent, as usual, saluted Ai Lizzie and presented her with a gift. Wuxia didn't say anything. Although the young man didn't know what a great existence was, he understood that it probably had something to do with Ai Lizzie's son of pale silver bloodline. In fact, Rose Dawn's member, Juliana of the blood breed, also admired her. But it was worth mentioning that this time, after Ai Lizzie broke through to source rank 3, the feeling she gave off was slightly different. Under the illumination of the silver moon, the girl's temperament had an additional layer of mystery, and the young man could also feel that the tall Ent's attitude was more respectful this time. After visiting the Ent and consolidating the alliance, Wuxia's mission was considered complete. There were only a few days left until the end of the year. The next morning, the convoy set off. Under the young man's command, the convoy no longer had any scruples and headed towards Akate City at full speed. A few days later, in the mansion of the Marquis of Akate City, the black-haired young man looked at the familiar room and leaned on the sofa to relieve the fatigue of the journey. Beside the young man, a silver-haired girl held a teacup in her hand and gently blew on it, taking small sips to warm her body. Luoya Akate defeated the monsters that were thought to be invincible for a long time, 6 disasters, and made a great contribution to the human race. This news had gradually spread throughout the various countries, and in the headquarters of the Akate family, Akate City, this news was even more well known. However, during this period of time, their own feudal lord actually defeated and killed one of these monsters. This news was undoubtedly exciting, and it also gave everyone in Akate City a huge sense of security. Even in the Akate mansion, they could still hear the noises of the people on the streets. This was quite incredible for Luoya and the others. After all, the Akate mansion was not small, and was quite far from the downtown area. In previous years, even during the new year, the noises of the people protesting could not reach here. Young master, do you want to turn on the mute barrier? Feeling the joy of the people outside the window and the liveliness on the streets, the black-haired young man was also affected. He stood by the window and looked into the distance with a smile as he rejected Anna's suggestion. On the other side, the silver-haired girl listened to the noises from afar and smiled. Work hard. But ever since I went to St. Freya Academy, I haven't been in the territory much. In the past 2 years, because of the changes in the external environment, the invasion of the mutants, and the attacks of the cultists, the black-haired young man was too tired to deal with them. He really had no spare energy to work, and the direct impact was that the economic growth rate of Akate City had slowed down a little. Although Big Brother no longer has any specific guidance, Akate City is still developing according to the plan you made at that time. In the end, the implementation of reforms, the construction of roads, the trade with Loche, these policies that made the territory prosperous were all made by Big Brother, so of course the credit goes to Big Brother. Because of the invasion of the mutants in the east, a large number of young people joined the army, so the economic development of Akate City was slightly slowed down. But even so, we are still the best developed territory in the theocracy. I can guarantee this to Big Brother. Young master, your plan is only half implemented, but it has already brought tremendous changes to the territory. The lives of the people have improved, and they all support you from the bottom of their hearts. During the prosperous times, the territory managed by the Akate family might not be a good place to live, but in these troubled times, the strong military power of Akate City was reassuring. And after Luoya kept creating history, he became the new benchmark of the Akate family after Kadia, who was not in the territory most of the time. Akate City, Akate Mansion, these were things that Luoya couldn't give up, and if there was an enemy that threatened his family, they would be dealt a heavy blow by the young man. Anna, how long until father returns? I see. When Luoya was still young, the black-haired young man had discussed the future with Kadia. At that time, Luoya, who hadn't awakened his bloodline, wasn't favored by Kadia, so the Marquis only gave him one mission, and that was to live. But even so, after reaching adulthood, Kadia had urged Luoya several times, especially after the war between the humans and the mutants. Leaving behind an heir had become the political correctness of the nobles of various countries. Looking at the silver-haired young girl beside him, Luoya's expression became strange, but just in case, the young man still decided to say some words and inform AI Lizzie in advance to reject any ridiculous requests that might come. Thinking so, the young man smiled and looked confidently at the silver-haired young girl beside him, and said softly, AI Lizzie, there's something I want to discuss with you. Chapter 525. In Xia, the relationships between countries were often twisted and complicated. For example, the Austin Empire, which inherited the legacy of the previous generation, and the Saint Mestre theocracy, which rose to prominence in the future. One had a large population and a large territory, while the other was strong and had a large number of followers. In the thousands of years of history, both sides had been in a state of open strife and secret strife, which affected each other's policies. However, even if the two countries had completely different cultural traditions, the policies of the same period were basically the same. Moreover, the upper echelons set an example, and that was the population policy in a time of chaos. In Luoya's previous life, no matter how many people there were, it would only increase the labor force corresponding to the number of people. However, in Xia, as long as one lucky person won the lottery and gave birth to an extraordinary genius, it was very likely that it would have a certain impact on the entire country in a short period of time. In the Saint Mestre theocracy, there was a special law that was used during the Holy War. One of the laws was aimed at the nobles, and it was extremely strict. It required them to have children before the age of 20, or they would face severe punishment. If this was in Luoya's previous life, this kind of policy would be criticized for being inhumane. However, in Xia, which was not an intelligent race like humans, this was an iron law passed down from the era of the ancestors, and it was also the consensus of the people. In order to not let the race go extinct, it was necessary to ensure that the population would continue to grow. This was especially true for the nobles, who had a higher probability of giving birth to extraordinary people. In the face of the will of such a country, or even the will of a race, anyone who opposed it was powerless. Remember, of course, those who could not give birth to a child due to their special constitution were exceptions. For this group of people, not only would the Vatican not punish them, but they would also send people to treat them. It could be said that they were very humane. It was obvious that Miss Angel would not do such a thing, but even so, in this kind of environment, Luoya could not pass the hurdle of Kadia. After all, in the eyes of the Marquis, the princess could not give birth because of the leadership of the Vatican. However, the other girl in the family did not have such a restriction, and she was just about to reach adulthood. Looking at the silver-haired girl, the black-haired young man didn't know how to explain himself. After pondering for a long time, he finally told her what Kadia thought. After hearing Luoya's words, Ai Lizzie couldn't help but widen her red eyes and freeze on the spot. Hearing Luoya's insinuating words, Ai Lizzie asked in surprise. The black-haired youth couldn't help but sigh helplessly. The black-haired youth looked at the girl, his heart filled with guilt. He felt that Kadia had been too hasty this time. However, what the youth didn't know was that Ai Lizzie's thoughts were completely different from his. Blinking her eyes, the silver-haired girl once again understood Luoya's words. She couldn't believe it for a moment. Could a pie really fall from the sky? How could he when while sitting at home? Once they got married, Ai Lizzie could easily overcome the problem that had been hindering her for a long time, which was her sibling relationship with Luoya. In addition to Luoya's love for her, although both the Marquis and the black-haired youth had always treated Ai Lizzie as family, in this kind of important matter that concerned the survival of the family, Ai Lizzie wasn't in a good position to express her position. Putting aside the fact that Luoya was the successor of the Akit family, Ai Lizzie, as an adopted daughter, rebelled against Kadia's orders. This wasn't good in the eyes of the outside world. Ai Lizzie, don't feel pressured. Just say what's in your heart. I believe that Father will still consider our words. Unsure if it was because of the consolation, after hearing Luoya's words, the silver-haired girl's eyes flickered with a determined look. Seeing this situation, the youth heaved a sigh of relief, as if everything was finally settled. However, although Luoya was opposed to making a move on Ai Lizzie, the black-haired youth's attitude was very clear. He firmly opposed it, and even ignored the girl's opinion. But no matter what, to the black-haired youth, this hurdle of his father was something that he had to overcome. After a series of preparations, the confident Luoya finally welcomed the day of Kadia's return. The return of the overlord of Akate City, Kadia Akate, set off a storm in Akate City during the new year. For ordinary people, stability meant everything in troubled times. Kadia was naturally welcomed by the people, but compared to Luoya, the scale of the welcome was slightly smaller. However, this wasn't because Kadia wasn't good enough, but because Luoya was too good. On the other hand, there was a difference in the age of the supporters of both sides. As the next overlord, Luoya's supporters were mostly young adults who benefited from the development of the territory, especially among the women. On the other hand, Kadia's supporters were mostly composed middle-aged and elderly people. Therefore, the way and atmosphere of both sides were completely different. Different crowds and different ways of welcoming made it difficult to distinguish between the two sides. However, whether it was Luoya or Kadia, this wasn't important. Right now, the father and son were focused on other things. This time, Kadia didn't return home without a purpose. In fact, the Marquis who was at the front line could choose not to come back. However, when he thought of his hometown that was empty, Kadia's heart trembled. He had no choice but to come back. The Marquis still remembered that a few years ago, at the same table, Kadia looked at Luoya who was being fought over by several talented girls. He felt that his son's method of picking up girls was unfathomable. No, strictly speaking, the youth didn't do nothing. It was better to say that he had achieved a lot. However, when it came to relationships between men and women, the youth was unusually rigid. Simply put, he was too restrained. Regarding this point, if the Akat family was a prosperous family, Kadia would be quite satisfied. After all, it would be a big problem to have an illegitimate child. However, in the Akat family, Luoya's overly good moral character made Kadia's head explode. There are so many good girls. Even if it's Rachit's child, it doesn't matter. What kind of situation is this? As a widower who had been single for more than 10 years, Kadia's degree of purity was better than Luoya's. Naturally, there was nothing to criticize. However, the Marquis thoughts didn't change. With a slight sigh, Kadia looked at the youth with a rare look of disappointment. However, when he saw the girl beside the youth, Kadia's heart slowly calmed down. But for Ai Lizi Akat, there was no such worry at all. In a situation where both of the Akat family members could go to the battlefield, Ai Lizi absolutely couldn't go to the front line. Looking at Ai Lizi who sat quietly beside the youth, Kadia's expression gradually calmed down. Putting down the teacup, the Marquis looked at the two children and asked about their recent situation. The battle was really difficult. I was slightly injured, but now I have basically recovered. For the soldiers who fought on the front lines, it was almost instinctive for them to be concerned about logistics and supplies. Currently, the Human Alliance's largest supply depot was the Ross Commercial United Nations. And from the Akat family's perspective, the Ross Commercial United Nations was an inseparable military and economic partner. Father, this time when I left Rachit, Uncle Bruce asked me to bring you a letter. It should be a handwritten thank you letter. It contains the reward provided by Rachit's side to thank us. Looking at the letter that Luoya handed over, the black-haired middle-aged man curled up the corner of his mouth and received it. After roughly reading it, Kadia's face revealed a rare expression of surprise. And the reason was very simple. Rachit's reward was too generous. Kadia, who was originally worried about Luoya's injury, immediately betrayed himself after reading Bruce's handwritten letter. He no longer mentioned Luoya's injury. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the black-haired youth also made a request. Let's meet. That child has also suffered this time. No matter what, you still have an engagement. However, as the saying goes, there are pros and cons. Although Luoya fulfilled his promise, this was not the Rachit family, but the Akat family. The silver-haired girl beside Luoya pouted at this time. Seeing this situation, the black-haired youth looked helpless and hurriedly threw out a new topic. The black-haired youth said so he explained the discovery of Master Andrew and the situation of the ancestors' remains. And just as Luoya guessed, Kadia's face suddenly turned gloomy and serious, showing a rare strong hostility. After listening to the explanation, the Marquis, who learned that the cultists were actually eyeing the Akat family, the most scarce resource, could not bear it anymore. With a gloomy face, he decided to send out troops on the spot, and decided to join forces with Rachit to encircle and annihilate the remnants of the Saint Heroes Society. Praying in Shiya's temple was a very appropriate way to handle this matter, and it calmed the Marquis' heart a little. However, when he heard that this ceremony was for 3 people, Kadia's expression became subtle. After thinking for a while, the Marquis looked at Luoya and said, "Well, I understand. I'll arrange it later." Huh? In the face of Kadia's sudden change, the black-haired youth could not help but blink with a puzzled look on his face. However, his son's puzzlement did not make the Marquis face change. Kadia looked at Luoya's golden eyes and asked solemnly, "This to completely eradicate the Saint Heroes Society and avenge them?" After listening to Luoya's answer, Kadia first nodded, then shook his head and continued. "Inheritance? Father, you mean? One of the reasons I came back this time is to remind you to take action and fulfill your obligations. The holy war of the theocracy." Hearing the Marquis words, the black-haired youth was unmoved on the surface, but he was not surprised in his heart. Beside Luoya, the silver-haired girl suddenly raised her head and looked at the middle-aged man who spoke. "Father, I know about the holy war, but isn't this too sudden? And Ai Lizzie and I are not ready yet." Listening to Roha's excuse, Kadia couldn't help but ridicule him in her heart. If it was something else, then it's possible to sharpen one's spear at the last minute. But when it comes to the biological instinct of reproduction, then any normal male would be like a dragon. Not to mention, it's not like the noble didn't teach them physiology. Although the Marquis was quite anxious about the offspring, as a father, Kadia still respected Ai Lizzie's personal wishes. The girl and Luoya's relationship was not a problem, but the matter of having children seemed a little too early for the girl who had just reached adulthood, so he should ask her first. With this thought in mind, Kadia asked the girl's wishes, and Luoya slowly curled up the corners of his mouth, rejoicing that he had asked the girl in advance. "Father, I think it's indeed a little inappropriate." After hearing Ai Lizzie's words, Kadia could not help but let out a sigh. But before the Marquis could withdraw his suggestion, Ai Lizzie's shy voice sounded again. "If it's children, at least 2. Chapter 526. Since ancient times, it was common knowledge that a sudden attack was the most effective way to punish someone. As someone who was well versed in the art of war, Kadia didn't reveal any information to Luoya before he arrived. Due to some other reasons, Kadia didn't inform Ai Lizzie either. However, Kadia was initially apprehensive about hiding the fact that Ai Lizzie was one of the parties involved. After all, the silver-haired girl wasn't the Marquis' biological daughter, and there were many things that required basic etiquette. However, when he thought about Ai Lizzie's feelings for Luoya, the Marquis was slightly relieved. In Luoya's previous life, men and women would often choose to live together before marriage as a test of their lives together. During this period of time, most couples would reveal many problems, and even cancel their marriage decision. As the saying goes, whether or not they're suitable for each other, you'll only know after you give it a try. However, such a situation didn't exist for Luoya and Ai Lizzie. Ever since they were young, Ai Lizzie and Luoya had never quarreled. The longest period of coldness between them after they got angry was 3 days, and every time, their relationship would become better. However, what he didn't expect was that when Kadia met Luoya and proposed his next child, Ai Lizzie actually objected to this decision. In Kadia's opinion, this was like the sun rising from the west. It was something that was almost impossible. The Marquis who thought so had a puzzled expression. However, he didn't expect that the reason why he ran into a wall was because the black-haired boy had already predicted this matter through the letters they exchanged. He even colluded with Ai Lizzie to come up with a countermeasure. However, the black-haired boy didn't know that his pride and arrogance didn't last for long. Although the sharp stab in his back was late, it still arrived. "Yes, so father, With the Akot family's current situation, I think it's too dangerous to have an only child. Moreover, there's often no one at home. It's too lonely to have one child. No matter if it's from the perspective of safety or the health of the next generation, it's better to have 2 or more children." What's going on? Ai Lizzie. What are you talking about? Didn't we agree? Ai Lizzie, don't feel pressured. Just say what's on your mind. I believe that father will consider our words. Does big brother like children? If you like, you can get more. Ai Lizzie is fine. Luoya didn't know how to respond to the young lady's blissful words. On the other hand, Kadia was overjoyed, feeling that she had finally solved a huge problem in her heart. If love had a form, Luoya believed that it was probably a very slender and weak seedling. Whether it was cultivation or growth, It needed many factors, one of which was time. With such thoughts, the black-haired boy was in a dilemma. Facing Kadia's urging, he didn't know how to explain. However, just as Luoya was having a headache, the boy's hand was suddenly grasped by a slightly cold and slender hand. Luoya, who felt something strange under the table, widened his eyes slightly and looked at Ai Lizzie. The silver-haired young lady took advantage of the time when Kadia was drinking tea to secretly wink at the boy. Her red eyes were filled with slyness. The moment he saw Ai Lizzie's expression, the black-haired boy couldn't help but widen his eyes. The boy, who had lived together with her for many years, immediately understood the young lady's meaning and smiled. On the other side, Lord Marquis put down his teacup and began to interrogate again. Chapter 527. In front of the entrance of Akot Mansion, a black-haired young man and a silver-haired young lady were chatting. Their impeccable appearance could be called a perfect match. Not far away, Anna and the other maids were carefully observing the movements between the two. In front of the door, the black-haired young man said something that made the silver-haired young lady blush. Although Anna and the others were curious, they couldn't pry. However, they were certain that something good must have happened to Ai Lizzie. Before this, no matter what means Ai Lizzie used, such as the activation of life energy or the conversation between her and Ai Lizzie, Luoya had never expressed her feelings for the two. She only avoided the topic by saying that Ai Lizzie was still a child. This time, Kadia assisted Ai Lizzie in breaking through the tower. Although Ai Lizzie was happy to receive support, she wasn't very optimistic about the outcome. But what the young lady didn't expect was that Kadia's words seemed to have some effect on Luoya. It led the black-haired young man to take a step closer to the relationship between the two and spoke his thoughts. The black-haired young man said so with a serious expression, clearly expressing the importance he attached to Ai Lizzie, and the silver-haired young lady also understood this point. Although Ai Lizzie didn't dislike the fact that a mother's status depended on her child, if the person she loved her more than anything else, even to the extent of having a child, it was naturally the best. Compared to a love centered around Ai Lizzie and a love centered around a child, the former was obviously more blissful. Bro, if that's what Big Bro thinks, then I support you. Let's pretend to be father for the time being. With a smile on his face, the young man gestured to the silver-haired young lady. Ai Lizzie blinked and nodded, placing her slender little hand in Luoya's palm. Finally, I temporarily gave up on Ai Lizzie's idea of having children, but what should I do in the future? Although Ai Lizzie was technically fine due to her bloodline, Luoya still felt that it was too much of a stretch. Luoya, who had doted on Ai Lizzie since she was young, couldn't bear to see Ai Lizzie suffer. Moreover, judging from her age, Ai Lizzie had just reached adulthood and hadn't finished puberty yet. Elder brother? Hiding his thoughts, the black-haired boy and the girl chatted for a while. Soon after, Kadia also came downstairs and the group got on the carriage. Luoya and Ai Lizzie naturally shared the same carriage. On the other side, Kadia looked at the two children who sat together naturally and smiled helplessly. He didn't understand why they needed an old man like him to assist them when they were already so close. Originally, the main cities of the 5 major aristocratic families were second only to the holy capital. In the past, due to the poor economy of Akate territory, Akate City wasn't very prosperous. However, with Luoya's reforms, Akate territory was revitalized, and as the main city, Akate City also became more and more prosperous. This situation continued until a year ago. After the civil war in the theocracy ended, the 5 major aristocratic families that had been passed down for thousands of years became 4. The Eric family was destroyed and their territory was divided. With the addition of this flow of people, Akate City could be said to have made up for its last shortcoming. It quickly began to be reborn, becoming a big city with people and money in one fell swoop. Its comprehensive ranking jumped to second place in the theocracy. The main labels were trade, stability, and the construction of the city also ushered in a wave of climax. After solving the problem of quantity, the next test was quality. In the theocracy of Saint Maester, when it came to city construction, there was one thing that couldn't be ignored, and that was the local church. Chapter 528. After the New Year's prayer meeting, Luoya Akat's feelings didn't change much. On the way back, Luoya thought for a long time, but he couldn't find a suitable reason. Seeing the young man like this, Ai Lizzie was worried, and during breakfast she directly asked Kadia for a solution. Uneasy? This. Obviously, even someone as experienced as Kadia couldn't deduce anything without any information. But even so, Lord Marquis didn't mean to be perfunctory, but after thinking for a while he gave a few possibilities. The black-haired middle-aged man seriously reminded Luoya to pay attention to his surroundings, and the young man heard this and had some new ideas, but after thinking seriously, Luoya still shook his head. But before Luoya could reject this possibility, Kadia raised another conjecture. And that was his own problem. 1 second, remember, internal? So that's how it is. Luoya wasn't a physical extraordinaire, so there was no possibility of his body being deformed. But when it came to the young man's ability, Luoya's closest relationship with the ancient gods had some problems. As the target of the contract, the ancient gods and Luoya were almost bound together for good or ill. It could be said that they shared a common destiny, and it seemed reasonable to count them as part of Luoya's contract. It wasn't the first day Altacia went missing, and she had been missing for half a month, so how could he only feel it now? Wasn't intuition generally the nature of prediction? First of all, naturally he had to continue to collect information from all sides, be vigilant at all times, and be careful of plots from the dark. On the other hand, Luoya had to continue to improve his strength, and try to get in touch with Altacia as soon as possible. After going around in circles, everything still returned to the crucial point of strength. Such a situation made Luoya feel helpless. Unable to calm down, the black-haired youth also lost his desire to sleep. After breakfast, Ai Lizzie and Kadia returned to their rooms to rest, while the black-haired youth walked towards the study room alone. Although there was no such thing as the 15th day of the new year in St. Maester, people from all walks of life had a long break. However, as the person in charge of Akat territory, Luoya still had a lot of work to do, especially after a long backlog. The larger the territory, the more things that needed to be approved. After Luoya came to power, there were many new policies that the officials did not understand. The black-haired young man's order was to report anything that they did not understand, which led to the current situation. Usually, when Luoya was approving documents, he would often have several helpers, but because of the new year, most of the servants hired by the Akat family had gone home for the holidays, so there was a shortage of manpower. Thus, only Anna could help. When they were young, the black-haired youth doted on the silver-haired girl, so he did not let Ai Lizzie come into contact with official business. He did not want her to be busy at such a young age. However, as Luoya became the acting lord, the territory began to gradually reform. The black-haired youth became increasingly busy, to the point that he did not even have time to return to the mansion. Thus, the girl changed. Thus, Ai Lizzie worked hard and began to learn how to deal with government affairs. After Luoya went to school, she quickly took over the work. Thus, strictly speaking, the work that Luoya dealt with in the past 2 years was not as much as Ai Lizzie. Today is the first day of the new year. Ai Lizzie must be tired from going to school this year. Let her have some fun. Even I don't want to work during the new year, let alone Ai Lizzie. Anna, you should go too. When Ai Lizzie wakes up, you can go out with her for a stroll. It's okay. Actually, I want to be alone. At the dining table, the servant girl who heard Luoya's uneasiness understood the situation. She lowered her head slightly and followed the youth's suggestion. The two began to work together. After the black-haired youth dealt with a large pile of documents, his mind gradually became focused, and his uneasiness was alleviated. Originally, for nobles who had afternoon tea and banquets, the status of lunch was not too important. Luoya did not have the mood to carefully savor the food. Originally, the black-haired youth wanted to eat while working, but this behavior was stopped by Anna. After saying so, Anna bowed and softly advised Luoya to eat normally. Seeing this, the black-haired youth could only temporarily put down his pen and eat a proper meal. After lunch, as a rest, Luoya read the many letters that were specially sent to him. Naturally, he did not know the contents of the letters since they were unsealed. However, among the many letters this year, a few of them quickly attracted Luoya's attention. And the reason was very simple. These letters were printed with the national emblem. They were the congratulatory letters sent to Luoya by several major countries and the headquarters of the Joint Army of Xia. Last time, although Luoya received a complete letter, it was the glory that belonged to the winner of the Challengers Cup. Whether it was Luoya or the champion of the previous generation, it was the same. However, the letter that the youth received this time was different. One was a conferring letter for the champion, and the other was a letter to win Luoya over. Whether it was the standard or the feeling of reading it, it was very different. But what really caught Luoya's attention was the difference between the letters from various countries. Just by looking at this letter, Luoya was definitely the most devout believer of Xia in 100 years. The praise was unprecedentedly great, and the black-haired youth blushed a little. But after thinking about it, Luoya understood more. To a certain extent, the praise of the theocracy was already a strategic goal. And after the theocracy, the praise was followed by the Rose Commercial United Nations, which had deep cooperation with Akkad territory. However, the direction of Rose's praise was different from that of the theocracy. Rose was mainly praising kindness. After reading this letter, Luoya couldn't help but smile bitterly. He now understood why Ai Lizzie went to Rose. According to Rose's praise, it would be strange if Ai Lizzie's blood pressure wasn't high. Although the black-haired boy was helpless, he understood. After all, Roja's fame was a glory for the school. Even if there were many students in St. Freya's College, they still needed to maintain their image through publicity. It wasn't shameful to brag about it. After pausing for a moment, Luoya focused his attention on the letter from the Austin Empire. After opening the simple and elegant envelope, the letter from the Austin Empire came into view. After reading it, Luoya also noticed that it was different from the other 3 letters. Official document, standard official document. It seemed respectful, but it didn't have the slightest sincerity. Without a doubt, for a letter to the hero who defeated the 6 disasters, this was very abnormal. Even if Luoya was a noble of the Saint Maester theocracy, the Ackmen who had always regarded themselves as the orthodox human race shouldn't be so negligent. Instead, they should be praising the human warrior. Looking at the letter from the Austin Empire, the black-haired youth narrowed his eyes slightly. Of course, he remembered the order that the Austin Empire's emperor gave to Lillian. Through today's letter, it could be said that Luoya once again saw the disgust and dislike that Emperor Lucas had for him. Thinking of this problem, Luoya was puzzled. He looked at the letter and frowned deeply. Anna, who was beside him, couldn't help but ask. No, nothing, just some problems. Anna, under what circumstances do you think the royal family of a country will be hostile to the noble family of another country? Hearing Luoya's sudden question, the servant girl couldn't help but blink and ponder. After a moment, she shook her head slightly. A problem left behind by history? Currently, the Akkad family was located in the theocracy, far away from the Austin Empire's emperor. Both sides might not even see each other once in their lifetime. In terms of benefits, both sides had no intersection. The Ackmen had a vast empire, so it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that they were filthy rich. On the other hand, the Akkad family was more relaxed. As long as they had food to eat, they could fight. The Akkad family, as the Shadow Eagle who once supported the Ackmen in the Second Era, and led the Twilight Sage Association to maintain the stability of the world, had now turned to support the Austin Empire's sworn enemy, the Heidi family. It was inevitable that these arrogant Austinians would view them as a traitor. The Akkad family would also be displeased with them, but it seemed that there was no need to specifically target them. Thinking about the history of the Second Era, Luoya, who was quite dissatisfied in his heart, threw the letter from the Austin Empire aside, and turned to read the letter from the knight's country, Ponde. However, what the youth didn't expect was that as soon as he opened the letter, a person's name appeared before his eyes. Friedrich Cambernet. Chapter 529. Friedrich Cobernat. This was a name that Luoya was half familiar with and half unfamiliar with. What he was familiar with was the Cobernat surname that represented the King of Knights, But what he was unfamiliar with was this man's name. The Kingdom of Knights, Pender, had always been a maverick. They were far away from the center of Xia and formed their own faction. Originally, the king of this country was called the King of Knights by the outside world. There was no special meaning behind it. It simply referred to the king of the Kingdom of Knights. However, this custom was changed by this generation's king. And the reason was very simple. It had to be said that this unique skill was very philosophical. The warriors under Friedrich couldn't stand it. After all, the Kingdom of Knights revered martial arts. No one wanted to follow a person who rode a horse and held a spear in front of the enemy and suddenly flipped over. In fact, if it wasn't for Friedrich's identity, he would have been kicked back home long ago. As an extraordinaire, body mutation was inevitable. After mutation, one's strength, speed, coordination, and so on would increase greatly, especially for a knight-type extraordinaire who relied on their physical body. Even if it was a source rank 5, it would not be easy for them to fall off their horse. That's right. Because he couldn't ride a horse, Friedrich didn't ride a horse anymore. Instead, he became an infantryman. From then on, he only specialized in one thing, cutting people down. And it turned out that he succeeded. From then on, no matter how stubborn a traditional conjurer was, they didn't dare to look down on the Kingdom of Knights. Friedrich became a sword saint and left his name in history. He jumped out of the Kingdom of Knights convention of only having a King of Knights. Although Luoya didn't know what Friedrich's codename was, he should be from the same generation as Guardian Antonio. They were both the last generation of the Twilight Sage Association. Because of this, the two of them had a good relationship. They had even gone through life and death together on the battlefield against the mutants. But Roja had to say that although he heard about the King of the Knights country, and even received his help, he didn't have any contact with him. So when he saw the name of the King of the Knights country, he couldn't help but be surprised. This letter from the King of the Kingdom of Knights, Friedrich, could be said to be completely different from the other letters. Compared to the previous letters that bragged about Luoya, this letter lacked a lot of praises. However, it didn't have the alienation of the Austin Empire. Instead, it was like a spring breeze. However, if that was all, Luoya would only sigh that Friedrich was a good comrade of the Twilight Sage Association, and a good senior to Luoya. What really surprised him was the other contents of the letter. Friedrich Luoya. Luoya, the king of the sword saints, proposed Luo Luoya, and Luo 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 Luo. Luo 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 Luoya, and Luo Luoya Luo Luo Luan. After reading this paragraph, the black-haired young man was dumbfounded. He didn't expect Friedrich to come up with this idea. At the same time, his heart was filled with the desire to ridicule him. Although the Kingdom of Knights' influence in the Kingdom of Knights was relatively small due to its remote location, and the fact that it didn't mingle with other countries like Xia, in terms of combat strength, the group of muscles from the Kingdom of Knights wasn't weak at all. In fact, they were ferocious. Regardless of military strength or population, the Kingdom of Knights was a veritable superpower. As the royal family, the Cobranese and Akate families were in the same boat to a certain extent. In this generation, Wilhelmina was the only descendant. If Miss Wyrem were to meet with an enemy and something were to happen to her, the Kingdom of Knights would definitely be affected. In this special period of the war against the mutants, it might even affect the entire human war. To put it simply, it was full of respect. It wasn't the kind of respect that was exaggerated. Instead, it came from the bottom of his heart, extending from the history of the royal family. Not only that, but it also had the care and concern of putting himself in Luoya's shoes. He had to reject it, but the way he rejected it was a little more tactful. After the Challengers Cup ended, Luoya didn't see Wilhelmina again after bidding farewell to her in the academy. The reason was naturally because of the Human Alliance Conference. After the conference, Wilhelmina didn't return to St. Freya Academy. Instead, she applied for a mission remotely and directly supported the battlefield. Chapter 530. The black-haired young man chose to soothe the unsettled emotions in his heart by working. This could be considered one of his methods, but it didn't mean that Luoya didn't carry out the plan he made last night. Although Luoya had reached the peak of Source Rank 3, Breaking through to Source Rank 2 wasn't easy. The barrier between Source Rank 2 and the strongest under the King of Races was quite thick. Even the black-haired young man didn't dare to say that he could easily break through it. Due to this reason, the black-haired young man gradually felt sleepy and dozed off in front of the desk. But he didn't expect Altatia's voice to ring in his ears the moment he was about to fall asleep. The moment the voice of the Queen of Witches entered Luoya's ears, the black-haired young man's thick sleepiness immediately disappeared. He sat up abruptly and listened carefully, but the voice in his mind flashed and disappeared. There were no traces of the passage connecting, which meant that the black-haired young man didn't get in touch with Altatia. So according to common sense, it was naturally impossible for him to hear anything. As the saying goes, what one thinks in the day, one dreams at night. Luoya had been tormented by an inexplicable sense of uneasiness since last night. He couldn't even fall asleep and felt a little nervous. Under such circumstances, it was reasonable for him to have a short dream and hear Altatia's voice urgently trying to contact him. The black-haired young man pondered in silence and considered all the possibilities. There was no doubt that the possibility of mishearing was the highest. But after pondering for a long time, Luoya slowly shook his head and rejected this most likely option. And the reason was simple. That was what Luoya heard. Run! As the Queen of Witches, who was feared by all races in ancient times, Altatia appeared to be playful, but in fact, she had a strong sense of self-esteem. Luoya paid attention to this in the process of interacting with her. Even if they had different opinions, he never showed any disrespect or contempt toward her. The human brain could record memories, but it could not create memories, especially things that had never been heard before. On the other hand, even if the voice was really synthesized by the brain, the content was not right. If they were in the wilderness or in a foreign land, it would be fine. But now, Luoya was in the Marquis Mansion in Audiobook City. This was the place where Luoya grew up. It was undoubtedly the place that the black-haired boy was most familiar with. It was also the place where his mood was the most stable. Thinking up to this point, Luoya was basically certain that it was Altatia's voice just now. She did not use the channel that she usually used to communicate with Luoya. Instead, she used another method that the black-haired young man did not know about. This should not be difficult for the witches who possessed an innumerable amount of knowledge. Her goal was also very simple, to warn Luoya. I'm afraid I'm really in trouble. Run. This sentence could be said to be relatively simple and easy to understand. It meant to ask someone to leave and head to a safe place. However, considering Luoya's current situation, this word was very inappropriate. In theory, there was no danger at all. On the other hand, even if Luoya wanted to fulfill the Witch Queen's request, he did not know how to do it. If the unknown danger was really approaching, then it would be better not to leave. It would be better to deal with the changes by staying put. Another deeper reason was that Luoya could not leave. And that was his duty as the city lord. It was the new year, and the streets of Audiobook City were filled with people. The sound of merchants hawking their wares could be heard everywhere. The entire city was thriving. If the upcoming disaster could affect this city, then as the owner of this city, it would be Luoya's duty to protect Audiobook City and its residents. Even with Altatia's warning, the young man could not shamelessly escape. Otherwise, it would be Luoya's lifelong shame. Chapter 531. The streets of Audiobook City were very lively this year. Even at night, the crowds didn't go home. After the large-scale trade with Loche, the cost of many things was reduced, and the price of the lighting curse vessel dropped a lot. Therefore, other than street lights, there were other kinds of lighting in the city. Luoya would frown when he encountered trouble, but when he encountered trouble that was difficult to solve, he would be expressionless because it could make him passive and calm, so that he could face everything with a clear mind. But this time, the young man's expression came too quickly, and the reason was very simple, that is the unknown. As a result, the black-haired young man couldn't fall asleep until night. In fact, until now, except for Luoya's own uneasiness and Altatia's words, no one, including Pei-Tila and the others, had discovered the enemy. In the eyes of outsiders, Luoya was probably fighting with the air, and using this reason to ask for support was naturally insufficient. A year ago, Nua Ire's bloodline outbreak and not long ago, Xia Luo's curse, Luoya played a decisive role in these two incidents. Strictly speaking, the Holy See and Lo She both owed the young man a favor, and from their standpoint, the three parties were basically the same. Thinking that the home that he grew up with and created countless memories might be caught in the flames of war, Luoya's mood was particularly heavy, and this was one of the reasons why he couldn't fall asleep. However, before Luoya could see enough of the fireworks in Akate City, a pair of delicate white hands suddenly covered the young man's eyes from behind. A somewhat naughty voice came into his ears, and a soft body leaned on Luoya's back. The black-haired young man smelled the familiar fragrance of the girl's body, and he couldn't help but feel a little helpless. But then he opened his mouth to answer. The answer is correct. After a light kiss, Ai Lizzie let go of the little hand that covered the young man's eyes, turned around, and came to the front of Luoya. She threw herself into the young man's arms and rubbed against him, obviously very happy. Feeling the warmth of the girl in his arms, Luoya's face couldn't help but smile. Yes, but it's not too early. The banquet will start soon. That's right. Almost all the servants are busy over there today. It's rare for them to come back, so father must have attached great importance to it. However, at this time, there will probably be fewer people attending. In the Saint Maester theocracy, other than the royal family of the Holy Capital, all the nobles would celebrate the new year with their families. On the first night of the new year, a banquet would be held to entertain the upper echelons of the territory as well as the lower-ranked nobles. Luoya had hosted similar New Year's banquets several times when she was the acting overlord. But unlike when Kadia hosted them, it was more like a company's annual meeting. In fact, Akate Hill was indeed like a new startup company at that time. It was precisely because of this major event that Kadia and the others went to catch up on their sleep this morning. Otherwise, staying up all night was not a big problem for high-level superhumans. Thinking about the crisis that could occur at any time, Luoya's expression inevitably became more serious. And as if sensing Luoya's mood, the silver-haired girl's smile began to slowly disappear. Elder brother, did something happen after I left? Why? Elder brother is the one who thought this kind of thing could be hidden from me? Looking at the boy who slightly widened his eyes, the silver-haired girl reached out her hand, gently stroked Luoya's cheek, and softly said, Ai Lizzie? The girl sighed slightly, looked down at the boy's hand, and said with some heartache. When the black-haired boy was still young and weak, every time he encountered a difficult choice in crisis, Luoya would use this method to relieve the pressure, and at the same time, encourage himself in his heart, and force himself to take action. Surprised? Elder brother used this kind of hint to himself a lot when he was young, and I already knew about it. Elder brother, I'm now a high-level superhuman, and I'm almost an adult. Although I'm a bit arrogant, I feel that I already have some ability, and it's time to share some of your burden. So, can you tell me what's in your heart? To be honest, even if Ai Lizzie was already a level 3 source-level superhuman, Luoya didn't want to involve the girl in danger, but this time the situation was a bit special. Ai Lizzie, actually I just received a hint from the ancient gods. For Luoya, Akate City was his hometown, and for Ai Lizzie, this was also the place where she met Luoya, got to know each other, and fell in love with him. It was filled with countless precious memories, and anyone who wanted to destroy this place was an absolute enemy for the girl. Saying so, the silver-haired girl was unusually angry, but after a few seconds of anger, Ai Lizzie recovered and looked at the black-haired boy. This time there's too little information, so I don't have any good ideas. Previously, I wrote a letter to the Vatican and Lo She, requesting for reinforcements, but that's all. The silver-haired girl lowered her head and pondered. Seeing the nervous Ai Lizzie, Luoya blinked and comforted her. Elder brother, I understand. Now everything is still uncertain, but if there's any accident, I will do my best to protect this place and you. So don't worry, Ai Lizzie. Leaning on the boy's chest, the silver-haired girl breathed in Luoya's scent, and her accelerated heartbeat slowly calmed down. Not long after, there was a knock on the door, and Anna's voice came through the door. Okay, got it. No matter the situation, the black-haired boy always had a smile on his face, treated people politely, and didn't lose his dignity at any banquet. In addition to his handsome face, which was determined by his genes, he could be said to be the perfect heir. Even if his heart was clouded by what happened before, facing Kadia and the officials of the territory, Luoya still smiled and politely responded to the nobles who came to chat. Because of the harmonious relationship between the Akat family, there were many nobles on Ai Lizi's side. But unlike previous years, the nobles who chatted with Ai Lizi were more respectful than before. In fact, before Kadia's return, the well-informed people had already heard that the Marquis intended for this talented and beautiful pair. Everyone had basically tacitly approved the union of a boy and a girl. Under such circumstances, everyone's attitude towards Elisa naturally went up a notch. Looking at Ai Lizi, who was surrounded by noble women, the black-haired boy couldn't help but smile bitterly. At the same time, he was proud of the current Akat family. But, no matter how monstrous she was, Ai Lizi's personality didn't change. Normal social interactions were fine, but she didn't seem to be good at this kind of situation. Ai Lizi was about to reach adulthood, so she could handle these small matters by herself. If Luoya helped her out, it would be easy for others to think that he was overprotective, which would lower the evaluation of Ai Lizi. This time, Luoya didn't tell Kadia about the Witch Queen's warning. It wasn't because he was afraid that Kadia wouldn't believe him, but because Luoya's father didn't have much time left in Akat territory. In this kind of situation, Luoya might be in danger without any evidence, which would only make others think that he was being unreasonable. And if the trip was delayed, Kadia would also violate military law, which would lead to serious consequences. Although with the Akat family status, they definitely wouldn't treat him as a deserter, the Alliance army wouldn't do nothing and set a bad precedent. If that happened, Kadia's reputation would plummet, and the Akat family would be humiliated. Following such rules, Luoya casually greeted the officials. But not long after, Anna suddenly bowed and came to the boy's side, whispering to Luoya, "Young master, the letter from the scholar country that you asked me to pay attention to has arrived." Chapter 532. Luoya expected that she would be busy dealing with government affairs after returning to the Akat family. However, a person's energy was limited. Since she had to shift her attention to the Akat territory, it was inevitable that she would pay less attention to the outside world. As a personal maid who had accompanied Luoya since he was young, Anna was destined to never betray him. Therefore, Luoya left all the important documents and matters to her. In the banquet hall, the maid walked through the crowd with a gentle bow. The nearby officials politely made way for her. For those who often met with Luoya, even though Anna was a maid, her position was like Luoya's secretary. Everyone knew this, so they treated her with extra respect. After returning to the study room, Luoya picked up the letter that was placed on the table under the care of a servant. Looking at the personal signature of Dean Antonio, the black-haired young man couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. Since he had the time to write a personal letter, it meant that there shouldn't be any major issues over there. Antonio's letter basically described the current situation in the northern mountains of the Austin Empire. According to the dean, the encirclement was currently shrinking, and through a special spell detection, it was confirmed that there were high-tier transcendents in the encirclement. There were people in the mountains. The only possibility was that they were cultists. The probability of them being a collector was even higher. That was why Antonio's special operations team was moving forward with extreme caution, afraid that they would miss this big fish. According to Dean Antonio, due to the importance of this operation and the possible threat of the collector, Bishop John had personally come over. The two kings of the first source rank race were ready to work together to eliminate this scourge that had lived for countless years to improve Luoya's current safety situation. Bishop John wasn't in the holy capital. This news was no different from bad news to Luoya. After all, in Luoya's mind, the safest situation was for Bishop John to secretly come over. After reading the letter, the black-haired boy couldn't help but stand up. It had to be said that the current situation made Luoya feel somewhat uneasy. It wasn't just the departure of the Holy See, but more importantly the timing. Come to think of it, the appearance of the collector this time was very strange. As a person who had been hiding under the theocracy's nose for hundreds of years, it was unbelievable that he would be discovered in the wilderness. It was also the reason why Luoya thought it was a trap for Antonio. It wasn't Antonio and the others who discovered the collector. It was the collector who restrained Antonio and even lured John to the Holy See. If it was the second scenario, then the situation would be completely different. The appearance of the collector would be a diversion, and Luoya would be like an isolated island waiting for the storm to come. No matter if it was Dean Antonio or Bishop John, they were both the kings of Source Level 1 races. Bishop John even had the bloodline of an angel. No matter what era it was, they would always be the strongest. If they really caught the collector, perhaps he would have to pay a huge price. Without a doubt, this was a miracle for the man who had been silently observing the Akit race from a dark room for decades. If all of this was really a conspiracy, then the goal must be huge. Gazing at the streets outside, the black-haired young man narrowed his eyes and thought of the worst possibility. Anna gazed at the young man who was rather agitated and asked worriedly, "What's wrong with you?" "It's fine, don't worry." Although Luoya made a lot of assumptions that sounded reasonable, one had to admit that these were just groundless guesses to others. In fact, according to common sense, the situation wasn't bad at all. Instead, it was great. The boy hoped for such a future, but it was also the least possible. In the face of any situation, one must anticipate the worst and take the most active action. This was Luoya's principle of doing things, and this time was no exception. At this point, it was too late for Luoya to summon the dean back. That was why the black-haired boy didn't choose to ask for Antonio's support. Instead, he suggested for Antonio to attack fiercely. After writing the letter, Luoya's expression eased a little. After instructing Anna to use the Akit family's channels to send it out immediately, the black-haired boy stood up and returned to the banquet hall. To Luoya, today was a day of bad news. However, to most of the people in Akit territory, today was still a holiday. It represented the conclusion of a year of hard work and holidays. Nothing much had changed, so Luoya adjusted his expression before entering the door. Since there was no help, he might as well live his life peacefully. In fact, in the face of Luoya's disguise, no one could see through it except for one person. "Madam Ai Lizzie, if you want to go ahead. It's fine with us." The girls looked at the black-haired boy in the distance and persuaded Ai Lizzie to go look for their elder brother. Facing the good intentions of her friends, Ai Lizzie hesitated for a while and didn't reject. Could it be that something else had happened? However, the guests didn't expect that after the silver-haired girl and the black-haired boy met, they didn't speak sweet nothings. Instead, they spoke worriedly. "It's nothing, just a few letters from the dean. It's about the progress of the cultist encirclement in the northern part of the Austin Empire." Hearing Luoya's answer, the silver-haired girl blinked and felt slightly relieved. She thought that the boy was Antonio, who was focused on fighting in the front lines. But to be honest, the girl didn't care too much about it. After all, when Ai Lizzie entered the school, Antonio had left the school to participate in the international conference. When he returned, he was also busy with the cultist encirclement. He didn't even have the time to meet Ai Lizzie, the new ring-bearer. As long as it wasn't about her elder brother, it was fine. The black-haired boy felt that he alone was enough to deal with worries. Ai Lizzie was already nervous because of Luoya's words, so there was no need to tell the girl more bad news. After all, other than making Ai Lizzie's heart heavier, it didn't change the situation. After experiencing the baptism of news for a day, the black-haired boy was even more worried. But unlike before, this time Luoya forced himself to rest. Under the same roof, unless Luoya lay in bed like a piece of wood for the whole night, the silver-haired girl would definitely know if he woke up in the middle of the night. With this thought, the black-haired boy took the initiative to cast a sleeping spell on himself, but the effect wasn't obvious. After tossing and turning for half the night, Luoya was even more tired when the sun rose. Luoya helplessly admitted that he didn't seem to have the talent to cast spells. And in this fatigue, the black-haired boy welcomed the last day of accompanying Kadia. It had to be said that Kadia's holiday was a little short, but even this short period of time was already the limit of the frontline soldiers, so the black-haired boy didn't complain in his heart. For the next period of time, the war with the aliens will be the main theme. And according to the information collected by the Alliance so far, the aliens may have multiple king-level targets this time. Yes, the alien strength has reached source level 1. Based on the history of the previous alien wars, their combat strength even surpasses the human race's king. Hearing Kadia's words, the black-haired boy and silver-haired girl's expressions turned serious at the same time. Luoya didn't need to be mentioned for the time being. He had already seen several Source Level 1 human powerhouses, and AI Lizzie had also witnessed Raiden's strength in the previous civil war of the theocracy. Looking at the children frowning and deep in thought, the Marquis nodded in satisfaction. He was happy that these two gifted children didn't underestimate the enemy. Hearing Kadia's warning, Luoya and AI Lizzie's expressions became more serious, but the Marquis words didn't end there. After hesitating for a moment, Kadia looked at the black-haired boy and spoke again. Especially you, Luoya, you have to be especially careful. Chapter 533. Ever since he was a child, Luoya felt that he had always been targeted. From the girl who might destroy Luoya to the cultists who had a feud with the Akot family. All of them were potential threats. The mutants, a group of brainless people wandering in the wild. How could they have a feud with him? Father, do you mean that my brother is being targeted by those monsters? It's not my opinion that the mutants might be harmful to the Akot bloodline. It's the prediction of the Intelligence Analysis Department of the Joint Army, and the reason is very simple. It's the connection between the mutants and the savior. Know yourself and know your enemy, and you will never be defeated. Although this sentence did not exist in Xia, as long as one was an outstanding military strategist, the enemy's thoughts could be roughly followed, and they would often have the same idea, especially when facing a powerful enemy. As the organization that commanded the entire human race to fight against the mutants, the headquarters of the Joint Army gathered a group of scholars who had been studying the mutants for many years. Most of them were from the country of scholars, but they were stationed in the eastern region all year round, carrying out in-depth research on the mutants in all aspects. The eastern region was not a good place. Compared to the capital of the country of scholars, Leinster, it could even be called a barren land. These scholars abandoned the preferential treatment of the country of scholars, and took root in the poor border all year round to study the enemy. Once accidents happened, they were often injured or killed. In peacetime, they were obviously not valued. In the past 1,000 years, human beings had a considerable understanding of the mutants through continuous analysis. Whether it was resistance or living habits, they could be said to have a comprehensive understanding of the mutants. However, the source of the mutants had always been an unsolved mystery. Among them, the relationship between the mutants and the revival of the Savior was also one of the key points of their attention. Luoya was not surprised by this. How could such a group of old people forget the humiliation of the past? Because of this, they were very sensitive to the relationship between the Savior and the fallen. Doubts about the relationship between the two had long appeared within the upper echelons of human beings. Kadia's face was serious as he said this, while Roja frowned deeply after listening to the Marquis's words. Luoya's taunt face was still an advantage when fighting monsters and leveling up. However, if he encountered the king-class mutants that Kadia mentioned, he would be in an extremely dangerous situation. He might even be targeted by the mutants' army. At such a time, knowing how to use troops was very important. After hearing Kadia's words, Luoya and AI Lizzie naturally paid more attention to military theory. After a series of sand table battles, Kadia was satisfied with their results. The Marquis was very happy, and Luoya was even more relieved because the sand table battle with Kadia was just an ordinary military game. On the actual battlefield, Luoya still had many tricks up his sleeve. After successfully passing the test, Kadia instructed the two to continue improving themselves. After inspecting the black-haired boy and the silver-haired girl, the normal parting session of the family finally began. The task given by the Marquis to AI Lizzie wasn't difficult. In fact, to a certain extent, It was exceptionally simple. However, in the eyes of the boys and girls, this task was impossible. That was to record the date of the two of them sleeping together. What's wrong? This is an easy task, right? Is there a problem? After his cheeks twitched twice, the black-haired boy braced himself and answered. However, Kadia narrowed his eyes and revealed a smile. Chapter 534. All in all, Luoya wasn't a person who liked small animals, whether it was in her previous life or in this life. As for Shiya's current life, Luoya wouldn't have a pet either. After all, extraordinary individuals were existences that surpassed ordinary creatures, and they had their own aura. Ordinary humans might not be able to feel it, but for small animals with sharp senses, it was very obvious. In the study room, the black-haired young man looked at the lively bird on the table. His cheeks twitched slightly, and his heart ached like a tourist who had just been cruelly ripped off. On the other side, the silver-haired girl's red eyes flashed with brilliance as she happily walked to the table. Big brother, this little guy is? Looking at the 50,000 points moving on the table, the black-haired young man forced a smile and explained the origin of the AI Lizzie. It was obvious that compared to Luoya, the innocent silver-haired girl liked small animals more, and in fact, the AI Lizzie with life energy was indeed a friend of animals. Looking at the approaching AI Lizzie, the spirit-sensing chick didn't show affection like ordinary animals, nor did it show obedience like monsters. Instead, it kept approaching Luoya on the table as if it couldn't feel the girl's life energy. Seeing this kind of bird, the black-haired young man raised his eyebrows curiously. 1 second to remember. Compared to AI Lizzie, the undead gods like the Gulandair were more likely to attract the interest of birds. The silver-haired girl's life energy might be similar to bait to other animals, but for the spirit-sensing chick, it was like arsenic that countered each other. Looking at the bird that was about to jump onto Luoya's hand, the black-haired young man felt strange. According to the principle of the spirit-sensing chick, the only people this creature would be close to would be the god it guarded and the priest who was in charge of it. Big brother, this little guy seems to like you a lot. This kind of closeness, it's as if Big Brother is related to it from the beginning. Hearing AI Lizzie's happy words, the black-haired young man couldn't help but be stunned. The next moment his eyes suddenly widened. Looking down at the small bird with silver-gray feathers and green eyes, the black-haired young man had a thought. After thinking for a moment, he reached out his hand and released a small amount of curse power. But in the absence of a connecting channel, theoretically speaking, their auras shouldn't be leaked. At the very least, they shouldn't be seen through by the little bird, which was the guardian beast. After eliminating this possibility, there seemed to be only one possibility left. Life facing death. This was a skill that Luoya had obtained from Shiya's blessing when she had broken through to the 3rd level of the source rank. Any skill like this would allow the blessed person to be tainted with the aura of a god. In order to test this conjecture, the black-haired young man slowly released a trace of curse power that contained the aura of blessing. And just as Luoya had guessed, the moment the curse power appeared, the spiritual sensing chick became excited. The silver-gray bird seemed to be revived at this moment. It suddenly raised its head and made a clear chirp. Then, it spread its wings and flew back and forth in the study room. Seeing such a spiritual sensing chick, Luoya had a judgment in his mind. The young man muttered to himself, surprised by the system's great power. It could actually find the guardian bird that worshipped Shiya in ancient times. Then he felt that the 50,000 favorability points that he had spent seemed to be acceptable. Luoya, who thought so, couldn't help but smile. But it had to be said that now was not the time to measure the value of this curse vessel. Luoya exchanged it from the system with high hopes. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.